I'm going to call the August 21st Airport Commission meeting to order. Can I get a roll call, please?
Karen Kahn.
Present.
Craig R. Curry.
Here.
Carl Hopkins.
Present.
Jim Wilson.
Here.
Paul Bowen.
Here.
Dennis Houghton.
Here.
Carol Goodman. And we have a quorum.
All righty. Any changes to the agenda?
Commissioner, I don't have any changes, but I understand Commissioner Hopkins would like to have the commission discuss potentially a motion to add to an upcoming agenda an item related to transient parking, if I got that correct.
That is correct, but since that is on I don't know, maybe it's a question that I was going to ask you while we were doing procedures. When and what is the proper procedure for a commission member to add an item, to request that an item be put on a future agenda?
Commissioner
ahead.
Hopkins, through the chair, it can be done at any time if you'd like to do that now, and the chair will entertain the motion, then it can be done now.
So I certainly am willing to entertain a motion if you'd like to make one.
I would like to make a motion that the commission request that the airport staff return, hopefully in September, but not later than October, with a report on the feasibility of an implementation of transient parking, airport-controlled transient parking, as originally outlined in the master plan, which would be utilizing ramp space west of 15 right. The concept behind this is that the fixed base operators...
Well, why don't we, let's limit it to the motion. So the motion is that we want Airport Commission. Could you just restate the motion?
We would like Airport Commission to return in September or October with a report on the feasibility of the implementation of transient parking on the ramp space west, airport-controlled transient parking on the west of 15 right.
Okay, so that sounds like a coherent motion. So having made that motion, do we have any seconds?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, that passes. Any other changes to the agenda? Alrighty. Notices that on Friday, 16th, 2019, at 5 p.m., the Airport Commission Secretary, a.k.a. Mo, who actually runs the airport, duly posted this agenda on the bulletin board at the Airport Administration. Public comment. Any member of the public may address the Airport Commission on any subject within jurisdiction of the Commission that is not on the schedule before them that same day, today. Total amount for public comments will be 15 minutes. I have changed that to 24, possibly 30. That's about as max as we can go. And no individual speaker. It says in the form here 3 minutes, but I've changed that to 2 minutes to be able to get more people to speak. Just as a point of order for Teva, I got myself confused here. Can we call for public comment now on these items, or do we? Yeah, because actually, none of these are on item. Yeah, none of these are on items on the agenda. So is now the appropriate time to call for those?
Yes, correct. And then items not on the agenda will be heard during item 2, and then items that are on the agenda will be heard when the item comes up.
Got it. Alrighty, then I'm going to try to get through this stack, and again, I'm going to remind everybody that I've really got to be very fastidious with the time, so 2 minutes. And
I don't understand why you have to limit to 24 minutes. If there's enough people here that want to address a certain subject in the opening part of the meeting, then they should be given that time. You can't just rule certain people out because, oh, well, there's only 24 minutes to hear 12 people or 13 people. That's ridiculous.
I'm certainly,
Parliamentary procedure.
sir, I'm certainly not waving them out. Tava, would you like to respond to that?
You, Chair Curry, and to the commission. It is at the discretion of the chair to limit public comment so long as it is reasonable. So should he's offering as much time as he can, he has that option.
So originally, it's laid out for 15 minutes, 3 minutes each. I've extended that to 30. My intent is to try to get everybody in, so let's see if we get everybody to stay in 2 minutes. Of course, you understand we can't go for hours, so as long as we get, as long as we keep everybody to 2 minutes, we're going to be good.
16.
Is that Representative Brown Act or city charter?
Just a reminder, the commission can't address members of the public. So to keep order and to keep this meeting moving fast, the public
Okay.
can address the chairs and the commissioners during public comment.
So we will move on to the first one, which is Neil, Commander Neil, I think you on the Civil Air Patrol.
You want me to go first, Payne, or you want me to move on to that?
I'm sorry, Chair Curry. That one was supposed to be, that one is related to the director, an item on the director's report,
okay.
so he'll be there.
All right, sorry about that. And the rest of these are, I believe, all on the same subject, so I'll just call them in the order I got them. And unfortunately, I can't read this name. Does anybody recognize this? Looks like Hans. Or H is the first initial of the first name, and L is the last initial of the last name.
Could be Helen Larson.
I think that's sold. Helen Larson, come on up.
Sorry, my handwriting was pretty quick.
That's okay.
And I won't take 2 minutes, but all I want to do. Okay, I'm Helen Larson, and greetings to you all. And of course, I'm here for Warren Butler's High Sierra Flightline Restaurant. I just made out the list. It is a family restaurant, and the food supports the aviation collection that's going in there. There's the employees to be concerned about as well. But here's how many people can be affected if this place is not kept open. Kiwanis Bike Club, Dive Club, Mahjong, Bridge Ladies Club, Delco Retirement Group, Sirius Aviation, Science and Engineering, Sheriff's Department holds. These are all people that hold meetings at the High Sierra Flightline. Santa Barbara Republicans, Santa Barbara Surf Riders, Corvette Club, union groups, church groups, UCSB groups, youth athletic teams, birthdays, weddings, and retirement parties. Saturday night comedy, 7 and 9 p.m., 2 different times. Music venues, country western, jazz, and Latin. And I think that's pretty much addresses it. There's all the think tanks nearby that come in there for lunch. I've been here since 1962 myself and seen our little town change over and over. But I think that this is the only place, and I know Santa Barbara very well, and I'm out a lot. This is the only place that offers so much to everyone. 1 minute, what's it do?
1 minute and 20 seconds. Awesome. Thank you. Thank you. Steve Surrey?
You might tell them who's next in line. They
Uh.
can line up and be ready.
I have not started the clock yet.
Okay, I'm one of the principals in the proposal for the Flightline restaurant, and I have been a principal for almost 2 years now. I was also a school principal in LA, but that's a side story. Anyway, I'm a native of Goleta. I grew up on the other side of the railroad tracks here on a walnut and lemon ranch, and my mother was before me in that family in that area. She taught me how to walk across the 101 when it was a highway, and I was 6 years old, so I could come over here and look at the airport and go to the old town. Okay, we used to go to the old Flightline restaurant over here every once in a while when my mom and dad could afford it. So this is part of my dream. And quite frankly, this city and this airport administration are stepping on my toes. And I don't appreciate it. I don't appreciate it one bit because I don't think they care about anything aviation related to this airport other than having cake with Delta Airlines over there last week or something or other. You know, this side of the airport, is my opinion, is neglected. And this is one bright spot that's right here on this airport that needs to be respected, regardless of whether it's the High Sierra, the Flightline, or who knows what before it, the Elephant Bar, and so on. This thing has been here for, 30, 40 years. And we are not getting any cooperation. We're getting a lot of stalemating and dragging of the feet and a lot of pompous attitude about why this will not work. Well, let me tell you, folks, it's going to work, and it will work, And if people keep stepping in front of us to stop it, it's going to be litigated to the max, and the city is going to pay. And I'm a taxpayer, and I live on the Mesa, and I have a right to speak, and I will speak, and no one will keep me from speaking. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve, for keeping that to under 2 minutes. We appreciate that. Sarah Cummings on the flight line?
Close.
I'm sorry?
I kind of wiggled it.
Well, Sandy. Sandy, okay, Sandy.
Sarah's a nice name, though.
Ms. Cummings, how about that?
That works.
Okay.
I am here in support of Warren Butler, too, because there's a lot of people that work there that are going to be hurt if it has to close. Folks who are just regular folks who try to raise their kids and have a night out once in a while. It's one of the most reasonable priced restaurants in town. I sing there once a month with a band that services people closer to my age than younger. And they have a Sunday afternoon, and it's just kind of a wonderful meeting place. Warren's working very hard to make this all work, and I hope that we can come to agreement somehow that that place gets to stay open. I appreciate your time.
Thanks, Ms. Cummins. Elvira? Are you out there, Elvira? And just so people can kind of, German, you're next after Elvira. So if you can get kind of pre-positioned.
My last name is Savina. I spelled it right.
Thanks, I kind of glossed over that, thank you.
Okay, great. Well, I'm here in support of Flightline and hoping that you guys are holding High Sierra and Flightline hostage in their willingness and their wanting to transfer over to the Flightline. It's not a fair thing that you're doing, and especially using a lot of what Mr. Steve was saying, a lot of blah, 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 blah excuses to hold this. One of those excuses you've used is the themed events that happen at the High Sierra and the Flightline. I don't see any issues with any of those. I've personally been there with my daughter. She celebrated her birthday party there. She's 10 years old. She had mariachi. How can that be an issue with the airport or with anybody? It's a family event. I held my birthday party there too, with music. No issues. I've been there for Delco retiree meetings. I've been there with retirement parties, celebrations. It's a community venue that happens to sit on airport land. And from what I understood, being a resident of Santa Barbara, the city of Santa Barbara is supportive of business. In this, your attitude is not supportive of business. And it's also, in my case, because I'm a Latino, and you've been harassing Latino nights primarily through the High Sierra, I feel discriminated on. That you're not supportive? Did you guys realize that 68% of the residents of Santa Barbara are Latino? So you guys need to consider that. And we don't appreciate your lack of cooperation, your harassment, and your excuses that you use to not carry over the lease to Flightline and Mr. Warren Butler. And as you can see, he has a lot of support, and we all do. So that's all I have to do, and I support keeping Flightline or you transferring over your lease to Flightline to make it and can have it continue to be a community gathering place, a restaurant to eat, to have wonderful events for another 40, 50 years. And stop using it as an excuse because it stops and it doesn't fit with your redevelopment plan of the airport. Leave it alone. Go, move on, go somewhere else.
Thanks, Elvira. German.
Hello, my name is Herman.
Herman, sorry.
Murgatio. Yes, my name is Herman Murgatio, and I already spoke to some people here. And I grew up in Santa Barbara. I went to La Cumbre Middle School, San Marcos High School, Santa Barbara City College. I got my major there, and now I'm working with Warren. I'm supporting him. He's a great person, great businessman, and I have the opportunity now to work with Warren and see future businesses. And now he's telling me about what's happening right now. Basically, you're stepping on my future, on my family that we grew up here. So I would like you guys to stop it and let us just continue. That's all I'm asking you. You're taking like a hostage situation, and like I feel like you're discriminating against us because of Latino nights. So I just want to tell you guys to stop it because you're basically destroying a lot of dreams, a lot of opportunities from people who grew up here. Stop it, please. Thank you.
Thanks, Herman. Henry, you're up. Henry Sarah? Saria? And Barbara, you're up after Henry. And I'm not starting the time until I hear the first word come out.
Okay. First of all, thank you for allowing me to speak at this meeting tonight. My name's Henry Soria, and I am the Senior Research and Development Engineer for ACI Materials here in Goleta. I've lived in this area for over 32 years. In that 32-year tenure, my family, friends, colleagues, and myself have dined at the property known as the Flightline Restaurant from when it was the Elephant Bar, when it became High Sierra. It was also a place all aforementioned parties frequented as well, and now it's a Flightline, and the tradition of going there continues. Why do I keep going there? It's simple. Great food, great service, nice people. But the biggest plus is that it is a community gathering place in an area that is mainly known as an industrial region. But it's more than just a gathering place for us working folks. It's a place where different cultures come together to enjoy what many see as a jewel in the community. From Latin night to the comedy club to weekly mahjong group to people from out of this area who just got off an airplane after traveling countless hours from different parts of the country or world, the Flightline is a gathering place that brings many together. Now the issue of the lease for this property comes up, and I'm shocked, not shocked, at the same time on this issue. Personally, the reasoning for not granting the lease transfer to the ownership of the Flightline Restaurant, as flawed as that is, doesn't surprise me. Just recently, the Santa Barbara Independent published an article on July 23, 2019, that clearly states, based on a study done by the Cosmont and Associates firm, that the city of Santa Barbara is a business unfriendly. One of the reasons for that is because of the red tape involved with any and all transactions. The recent report also stated the city of Santa Barbara needs to cater more to locals. And as a resident, local, truthfully, I couldn't agree more. As a local, losing this fine establishment will affect me on a personal level in terms of dining and such. But forget about me for a moment. Think about these folks here. What about the people employed there? Now you want to take their opportunity away from them, and for what? Let's face the facts of what will happen if the lease isn't transferred. People will lose their jobs. The local community will not have a gathering place to frequent. The property will sit vacant for many, many years to come because nothing will get done with the property. The immediate area will have a blight spot, and the city of Santa Barbara will continue its business unfriendly track record, a record proven by the Cosmont and Associates study.
Wrap it up, Henry.
Done? Okay. Well, the question here is simple. Is this what the city of Santa Barbara wants to be known for? I hope not. I will only end by saying please approve the lease. It's a great place. It's a jewel. Don't lose this. This is really not a good choice to make if you don't approve the transfer of the lease. Thank you for your time.
Thanks, Henry. Barbara? And after Barbara, we have Jody.
Good evening. Thank you. I'm Barbara Mincer, and thank you for letting me speak. I'm speaking this evening on behalf of Warren and behalf of the Flightline for a number of reasons. Number one, I live much closer to downtown, but the parking and the chaos and everything going on downtown, I find that I drive here. It takes me longer than it would downtown, but this is such a pleasant place to come to. I don't have to hassle the parking. It's a wonderful oasis. I come here for breakfast. I come here for brunch. I meet friends here. And the staff and the service in Warren couldn't be nicer. The other thing I hope you might consider is how inopportune or short-sighted it is. If you want to take that lease away from him now, you need to give things a chance to percolate. I know since I'm coming here, Warren has had Sandy Cummings have her show the last Sunday of every month. And it's a marvelous place for people to go, older people particularly in my demographic who would not spend a Sunday hiking and riding bikes and everything. This is a marvelous place to come to hear fantastic entertainment, to have a drink, have something to eat, and be with your friends. He's got other things planned but you need to give him a chance. If you take this away from him now, even though it may not be soluble right now, and you may say, gee, he's really in the red, I know you need to give him a chance to let it build. I know that the Sunday now for 2 years has really started to build a very solid base, and I just would hope you would reconsider on behalf of all of those of us who come here and really would hate for this to be taken away. Thank you.
Thanks, Barbara. Jody, you're up, and Natalie, you're next.
Hi, I'm an artist in Santa Barbara. I've been here for 50 years. What I'm involved with at the Flightline is that I sing here once a month. And I've been coming here since it was the Elephant Bar. I can't believe how many people I've met and the different people from different countries that I've met. I just wish that you could find a way, you people there could find a way to work with the situation, make it work, because what all of these people have said is what it means. It really is true. The place is a hub for Santa Barbara community, Goleta, all the way down from Summerlin. I don't know how far north, but I'm sure. And I just wish that you could shed some light into what I'm saying and find a way to make the situation work towards Flightline being open. Thank you.
Thanks, Jody. Natalie? And John Blankenship, you're next, after Natalie.
Hi, my name's Natalie Holter, and I am a manager, bartender, and server at the High Sierra Restaurant. And I'm here on behalf of all the staff, my fellow managers, servers, bartenders, cooks, dishwashers, night cleaners, etc. at the High Sierra Restaurant. And I just want to bring forth the impact that the lack of the reassignment is having on all of us. Manny Perales, the current owner of High Sierra, has been given no other choice but to eventually have to close this restaurant because he does not have the money to put forth to keep this restaurant open. Warren, about a year ago, Warren and Manny came forth saying, this lease reassignment needs to happen because we want to keep this restaurant open, and Manny does not have the funds to keep it open. And due to the lack and lag of the lease reassignment, this restaurant is now going to have to be closed. And, for single mothers like me, that's not a possibility. I work 40 hours a week just to make ends meet in my household. And I just think all of you need to know the impact that this is having on, small town people like me, not just Manny and Warren and the, master plan of the airport. So, yeah, I guess to wrap it up, I just want, you to all reevaluate how this is impacting a lot more people than just you guys and Warren and Manny. Thank you.
Thanks, Natalie. John Blankenship, and then Warren Butler up next.
Commissioners, Henry, Deanna. My name is John Blankenship, and I am the founding director of the Pierre Clysons Veterans Foundation. Also, all the airplane aviation stuff in the Flightline is practically mine, which is, don't question my sanity, just go over there and enjoy it. It's, for me, that building was built in 1943. It's history. I probably was one of the only ones here that ever ate there back in 1953 when my father flew me up here in a little J3 Cub and we had lunch. And little did I know 7 years later I would be at UCSB and then graduate, drafted in the Navy, became a pilot, went to Vietnam, and all that goes on, and I still fly. And I had a hangar right out there for many, many years with a Bonanza straight-tail A36. So I'm very familiar with this, and I just want you to know that the history of this is part of Santa Barbara. And I just would hope there's going to be litigation and probably tied up for a long time with the city and the and the High Sierra and so on. But Warren puts 7 days a week in that restaurant. I tell you, he works every day. It breaks my heart to see that the doors close on it. So please try to find something that works until the redevelopment. I understand it's got to be redevelopment. There's a great plan, and that's progress, and we all understand that. So I would just hope that something could be worked out in this transition period. Thank you very much.
Thanks, John. Mr. Butler. And Jill Thatch, you're up after Warren.
Let's see, I'm not sure where to start, but number one, thank you for giving me this time to speak in front of the commission and also speak in front of the staff. I do understand that the commission it only consults with the staff, so I do hope that you appreciate all the support that we have, and please advise and do whatever you can to influence that we take a good look at this this opportunity we have here. I'm very happy to have been working 7 days a week and working on this project. I feel great about the future of Flightline and what it means to the community and to the employees. And I'm just hoping that I know there's a big master plan planned, and I know that we're kind of smack in the middle of it, and I know that High Sierra has its challenges. And I know that we haven't turned the corner yet because we haven't changed the sign. We're not officially Flightline Restaurant and Lounge. To tell you, if you knew the restaurant business, just the fact that I've been able to keep it open for this long, for this past year, is amazing. I mean, if you know that much about it. They were ready to close when I first joined them 2.5 years ago. But about a year ago, I met with the airport administration and talked about with the High Sierra about the vision of moving forward with Flightline. And at that time, they gave me a list of things to do, and one of the most important things was to get to raise some money. I didn't realize it was going to be to raise a lot of money, but it took a while, but it was worth it. And I really believe that I got a great group, not only of investors, but people that were passionate about aviation. And I felt that I couldn't do any better. Plus, I have a lot of people that are on the resources, like John Blankenship, that have really been helping me, really surpass my vision of an aviation-themed restaurant. And I didn't realize how much history was here. So I'm actually more excited about the potential than when I first started, but obviously it's a little challenging. I do respect your position, and I know you're making a business decision. I would just like, to have you take a good look at it and figure out how we can make this work. How can we move forward with the restaurant, not close it, but, maybe work with the airport, work with the master plan, and maybe get the ball rolling, get the restaurant going, and then maybe work out some sort of deal where we give back the options and not be a thorn in the side. I want this to be work for everybody. As you can see, my main priority is hospitality. I want to run the restaurant. I want to take care of the guests. I don't want to be dealing. I don't want to be reading leases. I don't want to be arguing with people. I don't want to be talking about all this. I want to take care of my people. I want to take care of the community. I want to be a place where people come, hang out, have great food and great service. I commit that I'll continue to work harder on that, and I just ask that you consider that, and please give me the opportunity to take care of my people, the community, and my staff. Thank you.
Thanks, Warren. Jill Thatch, and then after Jill, Francisco. Oh, actually, I'm going to move Francisco because you're on a different subject. That's you, right? So after Jill will be Michael Cook. Jill, are you here
Yeah,
somewhere?
I'm right here.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I'm Jill Thatch, and I kind of represent the Santa Barbara Model A Ford Club, which was not on your list, but we go to the Flightline every month. Thanks to Warren being accommodating, and I tell him how many people are coming. We have people that come all the way from the valley to come down here to Carpinteria, Montecito, Santa Barbara, Goleta. And we love coming there. He's just, it's great. We like the food, we like the service, we like Warren, and we don't want to see a change because then we want it to stay. We want him to get the lease assigned over, and that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thanks, Jill. Michael Cook, and after Michael, we have James Fechner. James.
Thank you, Commissioners. My name is Michael Cook. I head up the Central Coast Organization of Combat Wounded Purple Heart recipients. I'm on the P.R. Clison's Veterans Foundation. I served on the board of the Montecito Association for 6 years. There are not many places in Santa Barbara where veterans feel comfortable, like it's home. It's like being on a base. This is a community asset. This belongs to the community. You go in there, families, locals, they see their relatives, their father, their sons on the wall. Do you know how proud that makes them feel? Photos, decorations, combat awards. I'm on the wall, John's on the wall, maybe some other people here are on the wall. And to lose this asset would be devastating for some members of the veterans community. The VA clinic in Santa Barbara shut down their PTSD program. Warren invited them to meet at Flightline. He brought them iced tea. That was significant for these people. Abandoned by the VA, welcomed by Warren. It's a big deal. I'm sure you have friends, relatives who are on the wall with their shadow boxes. And I'm sure when you see that, you feel a sense of pride. There are World War II members who are no longer with us, who are on the wall. That's history. That's great for kids to see the transition. World War II, Korea, Vietnam, Iraq, Afghanistan, and whatever's next. So it would be hard for the veteran community not to have a welcoming home. Thank you, Warren, for offering that to all veterans. Thank you.
Thanks, Michael. James, James, how do you pronounce your last name?
Yeah, my name is James Fenkner.
Thanks, James.
And thank you very much for the time to speak here briefly. I should begin with the very clear statement. I like beer. And I like the Flightline. It's really a wonderful place. As people mentioned, this is a place where very diverse groups come to meet. And it's folks that have been in this town for a long time. It's not like going to the Biltmore. This is a local place, and it has a wonderful local feel to it. It's decorated, as John Blankenship mentioned, really wonderfully with things you don't see everywhere. And the way it's run is, I think, exemplary as well. Restaurants are tough businesses, and I think Warren has his heart in it. He wants to keep it going, and I think it'd be a shame if there was some type of impediment there to give this guy a chance. So thanks for your consideration and time.
Thanks, sir. Henry, are you going to cover anything on noise or noise abatement and the director's report? No. Okay. Then I'll call Francisco. You're up.
Commissioners, Airport Administration, my name is Francisco Chacon, and I'm here to talk about noise abatement, which is something that's been going on for a long time, and it'll probably continue for a long time after this. But it's something we have to work on. First of all, I'd like to commend the efforts that have obviously already been done. There's a lot of more airlines coming in on the flight path, which is over Moore Mesa. They don't always turn at the right spot or come in on the right bearing, but they're coming in off the mesa. But there's some that are still coming down, straight down the street. Frontier, American Eagle, Surf Air, and all the privates are coming straight down. And I'm not in the flight path. And people say, well, what do you expect? You're in the flight path. I'm not. In the master plan, the airport master plan, there is no flight path that goes right over my neighborhood. So I think this is something that we have to work on. And we have to work on meeting the needs of the community and what the community wants. I've had some talks with some of the airport administration, and they say this is what the community wanted. And I'm thinking, well, what community? You know, there's a lot of people that I work with, I mean, that I live around, that almost everybody there complains about the noise. And it's not supposed to be there. Okay, when you have...
Did you plan that?
No, that's military. I don't call those in. Those guys are okay.
Okay.
So when you get over 500 complaints in 1 month, that's apparently in May, that's a lot of complaints. Now, if there's 500 complaints, that's a lot of fixing to do. Then June, you get over 800 complaints about noise. And okay, so there's no way that you can disprove it other than ignore it. And we shouldn't be doing that. We're better. We can do better than that and do something to make our communities better, because that's what the community wants. Thank you.
Thanks, Francisco. Steve, you had a second speaker slip, and I think it's probably appropriate to call you up on the commission meeting schedule. Yeah. Come on up. Bless you.
Well, thank you. I'm very honored to be asked to come up twice. All right, I'll try to be brief here. My first concern is this is the agenda, or not the agenda, this is the schedule of the 219 commission meetings. I don't know when it was published. All I know is I'm seeing 5 cancellations, which is almost every other month out of this current calendar year. I don't know where that fits in with the city charter, but my information would be that this commission needs to meet as published regularly. If you don't have agenda items, I've got plenty to give you. I think this commission can feel it tonight. They have a fundamental responsibility regarding this airport, and I think they need to take it very seriously. The rest of my time for this 2-minute little speech I have relates to your I would assume your overseers for the airport administration, correct? Or maybe that's related to Mr. Thompson's report about the airport commission role. I don't know which, whatever. I have an example of an airport certification manual that was published by the FAA from their airport office, okay? Federal Aviation Administration. These guys don't mess around. They have guidelines as to what's to occur regarding airport certification, especially when it comes to safety, which is #1 on Santa Barbara Airport's list over there. Now, this may sound trivial, but I want to make sure that the Airport Commission is overseeing or has oversight over these responsibilities. And I'm going to share with you some photos I have of where I park my plane right next to, on a city tie-down area that's right next to Above All Aviation, that part of the airport. And I've got weeds growing in the tarmac that are, some of them are over 2 feet tall. You can share them, you can keep them. I've got plenty of copies, and you can share them with airport administration. My understanding is that airport is supposed to be routinely inspected daily, if not, well, not if not, and weekly. Now, I suppose that makes you think, well, runways and so on. No, it's also for tarmacs. Weeds growing up, according to the Airport Owners and Pilots Association, grow up through the seams of the concrete and start separating it, and then the surface is uneven. But on top of that, if you've got weeds growing this high off the ground, I don't want that stuff getting cut by my prop and sucked into my air inflow and my engine. That's a safety issue, big time. So I would like that corrected no later than Friday, or I'm going to have to share those photos with airport office in Washington with the FAA. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Steve. Okay, the other 2 speakers, did we miss anybody with speaker slips? The other 2 speaker slips are on, will come after agenda items. So I want to thank everybody who's still here for keeping us close to 2 minutes on those so we could get everybody to speak, which is, really, really what you're here for. So thank you, and thank you for being involved. Liaison reports. I don't think, I do see Mr. Dominguez. Mr. Dominguez, the Santa Barbara Liaison Council member. Your report, please, sir.
I'll keep this under 20 minutes.
I see. I'm sorry, your time's up.
So thank you, everyone, for being here. It's great to see a full house. I'm excited for the opportunity to get this restaurant back into a more productive mode. I'm excited about the public who's supporting a popular facility. I'm supportive of staff supporting a fiscally responsible lease agreement. And I think there's a win-win here. One of my reasons when I ran for council is I thought one of my mottos is it's better to go big and fail than to go small and succeed. So I hope that whatever comes out of this process is dialectic. It's just a really super strong community center for people. So I see that in the very, very near future. So we just need to lock everyone in a room and nail out all the details and hope that we can come to agreement. So that's hopefully the goal, and hopefully we have progress. But other than that, I don't have much to say. I see a lot of progress at the airport. It's doing great. It's great to hear the announcements with the new services. We have great staff, and I'm excited for all the opportunities. Anything that looks like a challenge is really an opportunity if we are willing to roll up our sleeves and work hard at it. So anything I can report back to you from council? Any questions you have about council?
Nope.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Dominguez.
Great. Thank you all.
And do we have the Goleta liaison, James? How do you pronounce his last name? Does anybody know? James, help me out here. Well, he's not here, so I don't have to worry about insulting him. So we'll move on to the director's report. And I think I have one speaker slip that will cover, is it Captain? Is that we'll have Captain Malone address after the director's report. Okay. You're up, Henry.
Thank you, Chairman Curie. While staff has been negotiating with High Sierra and Flightline on a potential lease assumption for many months now, last week the airport received a letter from High Sierra advising of their intent to close the restaurant on this past Sunday. The airport responded to this letter and acknowledged their intent to close the restaurant. Subsequently, they advised the airport that while they intended to close the doors of the restaurant, they would be extending the date of the closure, and they also remained interested in continuing discussions on a lease assumption. After reviewing version 7 of a lease assumption proposal submitted 2 weeks ago, which still contained provisions unacceptable to the airport and continued to not address the airport's concerns, on Friday, August the 16th, the airport issued a letter advising High Sierra that we believe negotiations have failed and that the request for assumption is denied. High Sierra has been offered a meeting to discuss an exit strategy for their lease commitment, and the airport will make an attempt to address remaining term they are obligated to under their agreement. This decision is intended to allow both parties to move forward. While the closing of any business is unfortunate, this is the right decision and a sound business decision for the airport. Staff will begin looking for alternative use of the property and addressing any financial impacts. A lease subcommittee will be scheduled in the near future to discuss this matter further. News media outlets have provided some coverage of this matter, and we have provided copies of those pieces and the related letters on the back table for anyone who might be interested. Staff has completed initial work to identify policy to address the FAA compliance issue related to flight instruction activity at the airport. With clear guidance from FAA regional staff, a draft proposal is being finalized and will be presented to the General Aviation Subcommittee in September with a recommendation to the full commission to follow. Discussions are continuing with Civil Air Patrol on their relocation to a new space on airport property. While there had been an agreement on suitable space, Civil Air Patrol now wants to reconsider other space and wishes to have further discussions. The airport is waiting on a written response from them to determine what their specific concerns may be with the lease proposal submitted to them. CAE was scheduled to vacate the current space by August the 31st, so it doesn't look like we're going to meet that deadline. This issue will also be discussed further at an upcoming lease subcommittee meeting. On the lighter side of business, Contour Airlines has announced increased frequency on their Santa Barbara-Sacramento route. Effective September the 23rd, Contour will offer 2 daily flights each way between the 2 airports, with one departure at 8:45 a.m. and the second at 5:35 p.m. This is a welcomed addition to the service given the popularity of this route. And finally, Delta Airlines' launch of service between Santa Barbara and Salt Lake City was a success. The service is an excellent addition, well received by our customers. During the launch event, Airport provided a cake to celebrate the new service, and I did hear someone mention it earlier. Photos of our cake were submitted to aviation trade site Anna Aero to compete with other airport service launches with cakes, and we received the honor of Cake of the Week. We'll take what we can get. That's very exciting news. And next up, I have some report outs from staff. And first up is Deanna with Business Report.
All righty. Good evening, Commissioners. Because I represent business development and marketing, of course, we have to have a couple of photos for you to look at. So I'm going to pull this up real quick. Couple of exciting developments when it comes to capacity. We've been talking about capacity enhancements in the terminal, and one of those is the transition to shared gate use in the terminal. As you know, we have 5 gates that are all currently proprietary for the air carriers, and this last week we have begun the transition in the terminal. This photo was taken today. We have a training station set up in the terminal for the first airport employees to train on this system. As simple as it is, it does require a little bit of orientation. The first gate that will cut over to this system, which you can see here, there's icons for each air carrier, and essentially an employee would click on that link with their finger, and then they would log into their own proprietary system with a password. The first gate that will transition will be Gate 2A, which is the gate that is being used by Delta Airlines and American. It's currently proprietary for American. So that cutover is going to be happening over the evening of August 26th. That's next Monday. And so on the morning of the 27th, Tuesday, Delta's first departure will be using this system. It's a big transition for this airport, bigger responsibility for the airport. Obviously, because we're taking over some of the responsibilities that air carriers otherwise would have. So we're going to get used to having this one gate for a period of time, and then in about 6 to 8 weeks after that, we will transition the remaining gates in the terminals. They will all be common use. So, of course, that's really going to help us when it comes to scheduling air carriers and their departures and arrivals, and particularly when we have irregular operations and delays. So we're pretty excited about this transition, that it's finally here. The other project that got kicked off within the last week is the reconfiguration of Gate 1. So this is changing the gate layout or the aircraft layout at Gate 1 so that we can accommodate mainline aircraft there. And so you can see in the photo here to the right, that is the new fencing that went up that is now turning part of a parking lot into ramp space. And it looks simple, but it was actually quite a complicated choreography with the rental car companies, because we had to take 40 parking spaces from the ready return area and try to redistribute those and make that operation work. So we've managed to pull that off. So we're pretty excited about that. And that project is coming towards completion in October. So that's also great for capacity. We have a couple of things on the property side. I won't touch on them too much because Henry has already covered them. I will say, obviously, we have devoted quite a bit of time to working with the High Sierra issue, and then also trying to work as collaboratively as we possibly can with Civil Air Patrol to find them a new home on the airfield. We are looking forward to moving a different kind of patrol into their space as soon as possible, and that's airport patrol, since we are expanding. And on that note, I wanted to mention that as we have grown with the properties across the street, the hangars, airlines, we will be adding a new property management specialist to the airport staff on September 3rd. So bringing a new staff member on to help us manage our properties more efficiently. On the marking and air service side, yes, we did win a award for Cake of the Week. This is a UK publication, so we are out in the world. And Henry also touched on Contour, which we're very, very happy about. Delta, to touch on that once again, is very important to us. And I wanted to touch a little bit, just mention that we are launching with Delta within a couple of weeks a marketing campaign together with Visit Santa Barbara to market this service very aggressively, both on the Santa Barbara side and on the Salt Lake City side. So we're pretty excited about that. And just have to do a shout out for festival that is coming up in September. We'll have a meeting before that, but that is the 28th and 29th of September, and we love to participate in that. So we're looking forward to it. Thank you.
Go ahead, Karen.
Question, Deanna, regarding the common gate use system. Is there any kind of estimate as to what kind of percentage efficiency increase we now can get out of our gates with letting everybody use them and not just having one airline at a specific gate?
Yes, Commissioner, I think that's something that we'll be working with ops pretty closely to figure out exactly how we can start moving the puzzle pieces around. It's a little bit of a moving target, simply because the air carriers' schedules are changing at the same time as we're implementing the service. So it is a little bit complicated to figure it out, but I'm pretty confident that by the holidays we'll have a better sense of how we've been able to make this work all more efficiently.
I just wondered if the company that sells the software has a promotional piece in which they present you with, gee, you could increase your efficiency 22.6% if you have common gates as opposed to dedicated ones. But they don't have any general projection on what they...
They do not, Commissioner. However, other airports that have already implemented a system like this do speak very highly of the efficiencies that they're able to gain out of it. And usually by the time you are converting to this, you're pretty short on capacity.
Thank you.
Deanna, that was actually, I was going to ask a similar question, but a little bit different. How do the airlines feel about this?
The airlines are actually thrilled about this transition, and we've had just incredible engagement with them and their IT folks, because we can't do it without their help. And I think that there's been, we're not an early adopter at this point, we're a late adopter, so we've allowed other airlines to work all the bugs out, and at this point the carriers were excited about this opportunity because right now they're feeling the pinch of having to deal with the proprietary gates.
Thanks, Deanna. Is there, did we consult with or did we get referred to by the supplier of that system to other airports that are implementing this and kind of in the process of designing how we were going to do it?
Commissioner Curry, well, first of all, we did do an RFP for this, and it was a targeted RFP based on our air carriers, and they essentially got together and said, these are the systems that are out there. These are the ones that we would recommend using, and those were essentially the ones that we looked at. And then we did an RFP and competitively looked at it.
Okay, thank you. And then rent-a-car, how do the rent-a-car folks feel? So we got rid of 40 spots. I mean, obviously we don't have a ton of space, so I'm sure everybody would like more space, but are they generally happy with the solution we provided them?
Well, I will say that there was quite a bit of anxiety going into it because it was literally an overnight conversion. We had to re-sign the stalls in the parking lot, so that was a bit of a magic trick. But ultimately, it played out pretty well. One thing that we had to do is make sure that all the rental car employees were no longer parking in that lot. We had a fair amount of that going on. And I think the fact that it is a temporary condition and that when this project is complete, they will get their stalls back. So it's a temporary pain that they're enduring for the larger Greater Grid.
So did we create 40 new spaces someplace else, or did we just, they're just doing more shuttling back and forth from remote facilities?
Right now, they're doing more shuttling if they need to. Certain times when there's lots of drop-offs, they may need to do that. We've also made the World War II memorial lot available to them if they need it for overflow, which they haven't needed it thus far. So right now, we're in a period of time when they're short the spaces. However, once the fencing is really complete on the airfield side, we should be able to offer those spaces back up to them even as we're finishing up the project.
Okay, thanks. That's all the questions I had. Does anybody else in the commission?
Yeah, I had a question for you. You're mentioning that you're in negotiations with CAP and understanding that's proprietary and you're not going to share everything. Are we finding some space for Civil Air Patrol?
Yes, absolutely. We proposed, and Civil Air Patrol actually very much liked our proposal of one of the cottages that is located on Firestone Road. If you're familiar with those cottages, they're freestanding buildings, about 1,300 square feet.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it was really, at this point, finding a mechanism for which they can afford to be there. So, and we have, as I think they've also commented, provided a very generous lease proposal, and we're hoping that they'll find it acceptable.
Also, I'm assuming that people have looked into letting them use the visitor center for bigger events and things like that?
That's certainly possible for larger events, yes, but for a permanent tenancy, it just really didn't have enough space for them. Mm-hmm. So the larger space and the larger contained space appears to be a better option.
Okay, thank you. And then, Henry, I had a question for you. Mm-hmm. As far as the flight line, are they current on rent?
No, they are not. At this point, I believe they're about 13,000 behind, and that's shorting the rent for 3 months.
And that's the rent based on the reduced rent that we gave them a while back?
No, they're back to normal.
They're back to normal rent?
Absolutely.
Okay, so the reduced rent went away.
Mm-hmm.
And then just something else to throw out there, because Warren's kind of caught up in all this. I know our master plan calls having an aviation restaurant, and I'm just hoping that when that finally gets built, I know we're talking a long time in the future, that this wouldn't be a black mark for his contention to get that lease. So hopefully. Okay, thank you.
Anybody else?
Yes. Do we have any information on what the load factor that Delta is seeing so far, and what they've flown and what's scheduled or what's sold?
Commissioner Hopkins, thus far the reports from Delta is that they are tracking with their expectations. I think we know from the very first couple of days that they had nearly full capacity flights. And they have been doing their 3 departures, their 3 arrivals departures a day. Had some disruptions the last couple of days due to weather. But every indication thus far is that it's performing well.
Great. 6100 Hollister. Are there more items you're going to cover?
We will be talking about
Okay, I'll wait until later in your director's report.
Anybody else? Going once, twice? Okay.
Well, I'm sorry. Are you going to make some more director report presentations?
Yes, we are.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. Go
we're
ahead.
not done. Okay, I think Aaron has.
I restarted the timer. You're good to go.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Good evening, Commission. Aaron Keller, Airport Operations, representing the Certification and Operations Division. I just wanted to report back on some progress that we've been making with regard to the public engagement on the airport noise advisory program that we have. We did have a public view workshop that was held on July the 10th. Very well attended, and some very pleased individuals with the ability to leverage the technology offered by Public View for the online reporting of any noise complaints within the area. At this point, it's been a very soft rollout. We wanted to get into the data just to make sure that we were able to process and follow up accordingly. And at this point, staff has been spending quite a bit of time going through it, and we believe we can announce an official effective date of September 1st for the formal go live, in which we will be reaching out to the city administrator's office and over to the city of Goleta to put those put the information out publicly. So if anyone has an interest in taking a look, you can access this by going to our website. And if you pull up the noise advisory section, there'll be a link to public view on there where you can create a user account and then move right into submitting an online complaint. Additionally, airport staff is also preparing for the triennial airport emergency response exercise. This is an exercise that's conducted every 3 years. This will occur on the north airfield on September the 25th. And this will be the opportunity for us to test our airport emergency plan and associated response by on-airport personnel as well as our mutual aid partners who we rely on very heavily to support any potential incidents on airfield. We are also moving forward with the airport security system upgrade project. We have received our bid documents for the project itself, and the contract will be going to City Council for award. The lowest responsible bidder was Birdie Incorporated. They're a nationwide firm with offices based locally in Los Angeles, and that came in for a total construction contract of $1.8 million, and with a city share of that being approximately $170, with the remaining FAA grant being funded at $1.6 million. So we're very fortunate to have the FAA support to bring the security system up to the standards that we desire. And then also on a very positive note, I wanted to make the announcement formally that Steve Spurlock, the new captain of the Airport Patrol Division, has been promoted after many years in service with us. He started in 2005 and brings a wealth of local knowledge and experience that will help us continue the evolution of the Airport Patrol Division into a state-of-the-art division within our airport.
Okay. Do we have any? Karen, did you have a question you wanted to ask?
Yeah, I guess I didn't get the notice that there was going to be the public view kind of test period. I didn't know if a notice went out to the commission, and because I never saw it. And it would have been nice to attend.
Sure. I believe there was an announcement made at the previous commission meeting, so
Yeah. Karen, I attended. They did a very good job of it.
Okay, great. Thank you.
I had a question. The triangle exercise, is that the one where we have people pretend they got hurt and they're laying in the tarmac? And
that is accurate.
The big one, right? I mean,
yes.
It's the big one that drives, I'm sure, you folks absolutely crazy. I mean, obviously it's a good exercise, but.
It's great, and it actually provides a wonderful opportunity to engage local students within the local universities, Allen Hancock University, City College. We'll go out, we'll conduct presentations, kind of target the audience that is maybe more interested in this, the EMT courses, nursing courses, things of that nature. So it really kind of puts them in a situation to understand what this may look like should a situation like that occur.
And so that 3 year, that's also the mutual aid, so the sheriff is involved, the Santa Barbara, the fire department, in addition to the local presence we have here.
That's correct. Yeah, we really want to test our capabilities both internally and externally within the community.
That's the 25th of September.
That's accurate, yes. And it'll be that morning.
Aaron, a question for you on that. I understand it's a very important thing to do. Impacts be on our tenants in that area? Will they be able to do their businesses?
So we will be able to maintain operations. There will be an impact to the airfield just for general safety purposes. We will have to close the north-south parallels because that's where the incident is staged to occur. So it will be a bit of a headache for that morning, but in the interest of safety, it's certainly in our best interest to close that. So just a temporary closure. I believe it'll be approximately one of the runways will be closing the evening prior, and then it'll be a short 3 to 4 hour duration during the day on the 25th, where both are closed. And we've been working locally with air traffic control to accommodate that.
Okay. And an interesting side note for that might be if this was scheduled during our foggy season, it'd have much less impact on the local GA community that's grounded because of the June gloom. You're scheduling it right during the peak cross-country season.
Understood.
Just
Understood.
Okay. And next up, Jeff McKee.
Commissioners, I'm Jeff McKee. I'm the facility manager for the airport. Excuse me. I just wanted to give you an update on the 495 power situation. As you know, we had another power issue on the south end of 495 that's impacting hangars 14 and 15. The internal substation failed inside that hangar 15. So we're working on getting a design for a replacement switchgear. That's the original switchgear to the building. And again, it'll need to be fabricated and installed. So we're looking at probably a month for the design, and then probably around the first of the year before we'll get installed. Right now we're running on generator as we were in the past.
I have a question. I'm a little confused because I know just recently we had a long-term power outage and put a 4-foot-high concrete and all sorts of equipment. What's the relationship between what we did and what we've still got to do?
So Commissioner Hopkins, what we replaced was the main switchgear for the facility, so where the power comes in and is distributed. The power is distributed to 3 of these internal substations from that switchgear, and one of those substations failed.
So what is the condition of the other 2 substations?
The same as the one that is failed. Actually, they're the same age, so they're, we need a plan for replacement of those also.
Yeah, I guess so. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, that obviously that's got to be tough on the vendors over there. So is there, from a budgeting perspective, is that something we anticipated? I mean, we don't want to, generally, you're not, I would imagine we're not waiting until they fail, the other 2 fail, or.
Sure, Curry. As you know, we just got this building back last year.
Good point.
So budgeted for replacement of this substation, so we'll be finding some money to replace it, obviously, as quickly as we can.
Is the same firm, is the firm who's engineering the substation the same firm that engineered the incoming, the one that failed?
Yes.
Hopefully we can get some bang for the buck with,
He's familiar with this facility, absolutely.
Okay.
Anything else to report?
That's the end of the director's report.
I have a question. I'll let Paul ask his question first.
Oh, I'm good. Go ahead.
Solar. That was your question.
That's right.
So I'll ask the solar question this time on behalf of our previous commissioner.
So we don't have solar on the agenda today, but I'm happy to provide a briefing at a future meeting. We are having some challenges with it, but we're working through them.
Okay. Hangar 2 paint and windows.
As you know, Hangar 2 paint was scheduled and budgeted for in last fiscal year. We didn't get that accomplished, so we are working. We did a scope last year, and we needed to make some changes to that scope, is why it didn't get done. So we're working on revising the scope, and we'll be putting it out within the next month or 2, probably. There's lead paint on that building, so that's been the issue, trying to get those 2 contracts to mesh.
Okay. And 6100 Hollister, I'm confused as to what has been rented and what hasn't, and what the status over there is. If somebody could give me a brief update, it would be nice.
Commissioner Hopkins, I actually do have 2 lease agreement approval requests as item number 8. So I can provide a more comprehensive, maybe the context at that point will work a little bit better if that's acceptable.
Okay, Captain, you've waited patiently. So that concludes the director's report, correct?
Yes.
There's no
Yes,
other.
it is.
Okay. So before we move on to the consent calendar, Captain Malone, I think it's appropriate for your time.
Thank you for letting me speak. So, as you mentioned, I'm the commander of the local Santa Barbara Civil Air Patrol Squadron. Our headquarters are right in the back room here. We have about 1,800 square feet. We have about 30 members, cadets, and seniors, and we routinely operate my CAP aircraft out of the airport from Camarillo, from Santa Maria, all over the state of California. We actually go on missions. And we do things for the Air Force also, Red Team exercises. So I was at the Visitor Center because not only are we Civil Air Patrol members, we're also members of some of the other diverse organizations that are operated out of the Visitor Center. And this really nice brochure in 1951, it says, 10,000 people attend the first Tri-County Air Show and National Air Races held by the Civil Air Patrol. 1951. We'd love to do that again. Another thing, of course, is that we're a nonprofit organization. We do not have a steady income. All our new leases, they're approved by the National Civil Air Patrol. It's a big organization. We have 537 planes in the United States. It's the largest fleet of Cessna aircraft in the world. Presently, our legal officer for the California wing is negotiating directly with the city attorney's office directly. I cannot approve or disapprove of a lease directly. We did look at the Airport Visitor Center as a new location for us. As I mentioned, the Airport Master Plan is looking to do other things with the area that we're in right now. The Visitor Center had a secure room because we have Air Force equipment, radios, etc., VHF radio, UHF radio that we have to have in a secure room. We looked at sharing the second bay in the Visitor Center, which is quite spacious. And as I mentioned, we're in some of these other organizations like the aircraft flying clubs, the drone club, etc. And so we're able to go and see what the facilities are there quite often. So we kind of looked at that as far as sharing that, and the secure room was good. We were talking about trying to get some office space, talking about getting our 2 antennas installed, and we also were looking at putting our wind tunnel and our glider simulator in with some of the other equipment that we have there in the Visitor Center, and actually improving that and actually helping out and supporting Tim Lawton when he gets a large influx of people. So we're trying to actually be part of the organization and help out where we can also. The airport deemed that the Visitor Center was not suitable for us, and they showed us another facility at 1409, one of the cottages that were talked about, which as an alternate space. It does have good square footage. It's a little smaller than our existing facility, and it does have a place for storage next door at the Easy Lift, which is an area that floods, so we'd have to elevate stuff, of course. We're going to store stuff there. Probably, as mentioned, is probably one of the areas that's going to be tough for us is that after 6 months, it would be like $550 a month rent, and then raising up to $880. So in closing, when planes go down, when ships are sinking, when people go missing, when natural disasters happen, the Civil Air Patrol goes out there, we search, we image, report to the Air Force, to FEMA, and to the local law authorities and fire department, etc. Thank you. Any questions?
Thanks, Captain. Alrighty, and let's see, we have one last speaker slip, but I'm going to get to you when we get to item number 10. So we'll move on to the consent calendar. Recommendation that the Airport Commission waive the reading and approve the minutes of the commission meeting of Wednesday. Oh, I'm sorry. So there's 10 items, number 3 through. Okay. I'm sorry. Just 3 and 4.
I didn't see it either.
Thank you.
Thank you, Carl.
I clearly didn't have enough alcohol anyway here. So items 3 and 4 in the consent calendar, the minutes in the property management report recommendation that we waive the reading and approve the minutes of the last commission meeting on Wednesday, June 26, 2019, and the property management report, July 2019. Anybody like to make a motion?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, that's done. Now we have some administrative reports. You have 1 minute and 30 seconds for each one of those. That was a joke, and I'm not making light of. We had a lot more public comment than we typically do, and I really appreciate how everybody allowed us to stay on track with that. I really do. Go ahead.
Wonderful. Hello, Commissioners. My name is Sarah Gorman. I am the City Clerk Services Manager, and I may be a little over 90 seconds, but not too far over. This is a brief presentation. I, as well as Human Resources staff, are going out to each of the city's advisory groups or boards and commissions to just make sure each of you have a copy of the non-discrimination and harassment policy and employee complaint procedure. You should each have one in front of you, as well as a copy of a document stating that you have received, read, and understood it. I'm going to make a very brief presentation of a couple of elements of the policy, but ask you to take it home and review it. If you'd like to sign that document and give it back to me now or to the airport director this meeting, that's fine. Feel free to take it home, review it at your leisure, and then return it to staff. Briefly, there's a couple elements of this that I did want to highlight. First, discussing the definition of discrimination. Discrimination prohibited under this policy is discrimination in the terms, conditions, privileges, or prerequisites of employment based on the actual or perceived age over 40, ancestry, color, mental or physical disability, including HIV and AIDS, sex, gender identity, and expression, marital status, medical condition, cancer or genetic characteristics, national origin, race, religious belief, or sexual orientation of an employee or a job applicant, or based on the employee or applicant's association with a person who has or is perceived to have any of those characteristics. So that's a list of some of those protected classes that are covered under this policy. Additionally, there are different types of harassment that are called out in the policy, including sexual harassment, harassment on the base of other protected characteristics. Those characteristics mirror what I just discussed, and inappropriate behavior. So I'm available if you have any questions.
I apologize. What was your name?
Sarah Gorman. I'm the City Clerk Services Manager.
Sarah. So, Sarah, what you need us to do is read and understand this and then sign this, which you don't necessarily have to have tonight because I certainly haven't read it, but we can get it back to the airport staff and they'll get it back to you.
That's perfect.
Awesome. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you.
And I think we have Tava up next, item number 6, Airport Commission role and responsibilities.
Chair Curry, I know there's probably not a single person in here that wants to have public comment on that last item, but if you could just open that up and then.
Is there any public comment on the non-discrimination and harassment policy? Thank you for correcting me on that. After it.
Good evening, Chair and Commissioners. I'm really excited to be here. I'm Tava Ostringer, Assistant City Attorney. I've been working with Director Thompson to get you some training. Our original intent was to have a special meeting that incorporated some other items, but that would give you more in-depth training. But because of scheduling a longer block of time, it doesn't look like we'll get to that until fall or maybe early winter. We're still working through that. But Director Thompson and I thought it was still a good idea if maybe we could fit in some mini trainings. And so as the agenda allows and as my schedule permits, we'll be bringing mini trainings. So I invite you, if there's a particular topic that you'd like a mini training on, please email me and just let me know and I'll see if I can work it in. Some aspects of training are a lot larger. For example, if we're going to talk about the Brown Act, I might need a little bit longer time to do that, or some conflict training. Those are some bigger picture items that might not fit in a mini training, but happy to take your suggestions because I'm here for you. So my favorite subject, me. No, I'm just kidding. While I'm not new to the airport, I've been here advising the airport for about 5 years. I'm somewhat new to you, and that's because it's only recently that we've started staffing the airport commission meetings, and that's really a resource issue. We have more bodies in the city attorney's office, which means we have some more resources. So it's our intent to staff the larger commissions and boards, and that's what we're doing. So you're one of our larger ones, and so you'll be seeing me, or if I can't make it, another attorney from my office sitting here. I've been with the city for 12 years. I started doing prosecution work for the city, and I did that for several years. During that time, I also worked for the Public Works Department, the Police Department, the Parks Department, who I forgot to put up there, and they always feel like they're the poor stepchild, and then I just totally forgot to put them up there.
Wow.
My longest stint in any department has been Public Works. I was there for, I think, 7 years. So that overlapped my work with the airport. About a year ago, I was reassigned from Public Works to work for the Community Development Department. So my background in Public Works and Community Development is actually a benefit to the airport because as you know, you have lots of large projects, and as those go through, we're dealing with public works contracts and we're dealing with land use issues. So it's kind of nice for me to be able to use those skills and that knowledge and funnel it into the airport. And then the other thing I've been doing is cannabis regulation. I've been doing that for about 10 years for the city. I'm hoping to pass that torch off at some point and move on to something else. But for now, that's what I do. And I also should mention, apart from this board, I staff the Planning Commission, the Architectural Board of Review, and the Historic Landmarks Commission, which I just came from tonight. Those both meet biweekly. And then I occasionally staff the Single Family Design Board, and occasionally they throw in a council meeting or two if my boss needs me to handle those. So I have a lot of experience and I spend a lot of time with boards and commissions. So if you see me over at my computer and it looks like I'm not paying attention, I'm paying attention to everything that's being said. I'm just multitasking. I've really developed that skill with these boards and commissions. All right. So let's talk about roles and responsibilities. Who they are and why it's important. And the reason I started with this topic today, roles and responsibilities, is because I think you can't do your job unless you know what your job is. So this is where I start with all the boards and commissions. Let's talk about what it is the city to do and how you do that. And so, but where does that authority come from? Where is that defined? And that comes from our city charter. The city charter is our framework for how we run our government. It directs, through the Santa Barbara Municipal Code, the implementation of those goals and policies, limitations, and directions. And so the charter is what creates the boards and commissions. And it gives the authority to the city council on to what extent it's going to allow those boards and commissions to operate. It also applies to the city council. It applies to you as board and commission members, the city administrator and the department heads through his service and administration. And it provides limitations as well as granting authority and giving authority. For example, when we're talking about limitations, it's the limitations in the charter prohibit the city council from participating in the administration of the city, the administration and operation of the city. And they delegate that authority through the city administrator. And this is typical of general city law cities as well as charter cities. The goal behind that is to make sure that the city and its policy setters, which is the mayor and council, are coming together with a common theme and common policies that the city administrator can then enact and direct his employees and his department heads to implement those policies successfully and efficiently. It also keeps the city council from having to deal with employment issues and directs them to leave that to the city administrator. Let the city administrator do the appointments and the removals of the employees.
Oh, oops, I'm not sure what happened there. Is that right? There we go, okay. Sorry, I'm not familiar with this little clicker. So, when we talk about roles and responsibilities, it's not just your roles and responsibilities that affect this commission. It's my roles and responsibilities and how I can help you. And it's Director Thompson's roles and responsibilities. So I wanted to touch on all of that globally. So the charter provides that the city attorney will represent the city council and all the city officers and its boards and commission members. And by representing, I'm here to give you advice when you request it. I'm here to give you advice sometimes when you don't request it, but I see you going down a path that I don't think you really legally want to go. So that's occasionally when you'll hear me pipe up without asking. And then, of course, there's other duties that the council may direct, generally through their open meetings, that projects that they want us to work on. And the charter allows the city attorney to appoint deputies
or assistants to help him follow these goals and policies and responsibilities. So in our office, we currently have 7 assistants that work under his supervision and to further his goals. And hopefully we may be getting another one, so we'll have even more resources and maybe more boards and commissions we can staff. So the charter also gives to council the authority to create by ordinance departments to help them in the operation of the city. And Chapter 2.12 of the Municipal Code is the ordinance that council has adopted to create and establish the airport and then set forth the operational requirements and the duties of the airport director, who is appointed by the city administrator. The code provides that the director is responsible for the supervision of all the personnel and the performance of the function of the airport. And I wanted to read that directly because it comes straight from the code. And it's a little odd language, but really what it refers to, the function is all the issues and the responsibilities of the day-to-day operation of the airport. So the airport director's job is to keep the airport running, to negotiate its contracts, to negotiate its leases, to purchase equipment, to look at the timelines for critical project, make sure they're running smoothly, to supervise his personnel, and make sure that we're in compliance with all the laws and regulations. And the Santa Barbara Municipal Code also gives him the ability to organize and maintain divisions within his department to help him further that objective. And you've heard from each of the division heads here, so that's who's helping facilitate those responsibilities. Now, the charter also establishes the Airport Commission, and it authorizes the council to set forth the powers and duties through an ordinance. And the powers and duties that it allows the Airport Commission to exercise, if it so chooses, is the selection and appointment of employees, to execute leases, to construct improvements, purchase and dispose of property, promulgate the regulation and the operation of the maintenance, and establish fees and rents. So this is incorporated in the charter section, establishing your commission, and that's the broadest extent of authority that council can grant to you if they choose. So while council has the option under the charter to grant this express authority to you, and when I say express authority, I'm talking about the ability to make a decision without seeking council approval. So, and what council has granted you the authority to do is very specific. It has granted you the authority to approve leases not longer than 5 years, so long as they don't involve special circumstances. Special circumstances being anything that would be of public interest. So I think that's a know it when you see it kind of thing, and the director and the commission have the discretion then to say, no, we don't want to make this decision ourselves. We're going to send it up to council with a recommendation and then just have them make the final call. And just as an aside, if you do exercise your authority and approve or deny a lease of 5 years or less, then a denial of the lease could be appealed to council, and then it would just eventually get popped back up there, and they'd make the final call. So while council hasn't given you the full express authority, they do want your advice. And Section 18.44.070 gives you the duty and conveys that duty for you to advise the council on certain issues. The council recognizes that as members of the public with a unique connection to our airport, and some of you with specific aviation experience have a lot to offer. You have valuable insight that both council and staff can benefit from. So for those topics, what What council wants from you and needs from you is recommendations on the appointment of the airport director, contracts subject to council approval, and leases over 5 years. They want your input on promulgation of rules and regulations, the preparation of financial plans and budgets, development plans, and resolutions. So everything else that was in the charter section that was outlined for your authority, they want to hear from you on it. They just have said, we want to hear a recommendation, but we want to reserve to ourselves the power to make those final decisions. So how does the process all work and create an efficient government? So how it should work, and it generally does, is the airport director in his day-to-day operations will negotiate contracts, negotiate leases, or promulgate programs that you may have suggested you would like us to consider. And he'll bring those forward to you. And with regards to leases and contracts, assuming the need to go to council for approval, you will have the option to recommend it or recommend denial. So the contracts will already have been negotiated and the terms have been established between both the airport and the contracting party or the lessee, and then we'll be bringing it to you for a recommendation. With regards to programs, the staff should be bringing you a draft of a program to implement and saying, here's our draft, here's what we think will work. At that point, you'll hear public comment, you may have input, you may accept it right there and recommend approval to council, or you may say, we couldn't recommend approval right at this time. These are the issues that we want to work out. With regards to leases, 5 years or less, the commission can just approve those or deny those. If you deny it, then the lessee has the option to appeal it to council. And then where do I fit in all of this? Like I mentioned in the beginning, I'm just here to advise you. I spend a lot of time with Director Thompson and his staff reviewing all the contracts and leases. I don't participate in the negotiation of those. I'm simply looking at them to make sure that whatever we're agreeing to and establishing complies with the law and is enforceable. So I think the captain mentioned I was directly negotiating with their attorney, and I have been in contact with their attorney, but I won't necessarily engage with their legal counsel until we have some negotiated terms that need me to review them and make sure that they pass legal muster. So with that brief mini training, I am available for questions if it pleases the chair after public comment.
So do we have any public comment on this item? And, just a note, your involvement is appreciated certainly by me, because counting this one, I've been involved in one public commission or board. That would be this one. Plenty of other boards. So we do appreciate having you here, and I know you cover a lot of things, which I was going to ask when you go home. But
tonight, probably not till 10.
So I wanted one clarification I had, and then other people may have questions. I think I heard you say that on leases that are 5 years or less, that, and I don't want to use the word role responsibility, but one of the things we can do, we can not approve it, but we can recommend approval, or we can recommend denial. Are those the words you used? Am I repeating that correctly?
So for leases 5 years or less, you have the express authority that's granted to you under the municipal code. The council has given you that authority, and they want you to make a decision. They want you to say, yes, approved, no, denied.
So we're not recommending that. We
No.
are.
I'm sorry.
They've delegated to us the authority to approve or deny, and if denied, then it can be appealed to the city council by the person.
Absolutely, with the exception of that weird special circumstances. So if the commission reviews it and decides that there's some special circumstances, or the airport director were to review it and find that there's special circumstances, then it would be a recommendation to the city council.
Question on that. So if the language we have seen often is that here's a lease and the commission is asked to recommend to city council that it be approved, is actually not correct, because we're the ones who are approving it and city council doesn't have to subsequently approve it after we do?
So the lease, the language when you're getting the recommendation, that is a lease that's 5 years or greater. And one of the reasons for this particular one with regards to leases 5 years or greater, they require a city ordinance. So our charter requires any agreement over 5 years to be approved by an ordinance. So that's my thought behind the 5-year rule.
Okay, so anything 5 years or less, it's kind of like the buck stops here. And do we actually know that any of those things that are 5 years or less continue to go to city council, or they just advise them that this has been done in a report, or do they actually, city council doesn't subsequently vote again on what we just voted on, do they?
They do not, unless if you did happen to not approve it, make a motion to deny, and the objected to that, then they could appeal it to council. But otherwise, council's not going to see those leases.
Thank you.
And then I want to second the thank you for being at our meetings and helping us out. It's good to have you here. I've been to many of these meetings without legal counsel and seen it kind of wander. You're quoting the city charter. Is that available online for those of us that want to self-learn, or is it something we need to go buy a book?
It is available online, and I can provide the links to both the charter and the applicable municipal code sections that I've quoted to you, and I can provide them to Mo and have them distributed to the board, and it'll be available.
Okay. And then the other thing I wanted to comment on, you said that the Airport Commission responsibility is to select and appoint employees. The only employee I was aware of was the airport director position.
So the city administrator appoints the airport director. However, the section, I think it's section 070, yes, conveys on you the duty to advise the council on whether you would like to have this particular person appointed. So the city administrator appoints the airport director with approval of council. So you're adding that.
This conflicts with my experience where we had a closed meeting at City Hall where we were informed that we needed to approve the director, and that was the statement by Paul. So I'm wondering about that. But the question I just asked you was to select and appoint employees as part of the Airport Commission's responsibility, which I don't think that's correct.
That's not correct, no.
Okay, it's in your slide.
That's in the charter. The charter, I believe, gives us the right to appoint all employees. The municipal code restricts that right to advise for the director only. Is that correct?
No, so the charter limits the councils or prohibits the council from getting involved necessarily or with the hiring and firing of the department heads. However, it does the municipal code then asks the city council for approval on the city administrator's decision to appoint. The city, you do have the duty to advise them, though, regarding the appointment. So I think what gets confusing when you read the charter that creates your commission and establishes your authority, it says the council may do all these things. The commission may have all of these powers. However, then it's caveated to say basically the council can give you these powers, and they do that by ordinance. So they have the choice on what of those powers they want you to have expressly, and so they do that through the ordinance. And so they've done it through two sections. They've given you the authority, the express authority, to make a decision with regards to leases 5 years or less. They've withheld that authority, but conveyed on you a duty to advise them with respect to all the other authorities that the charter grants to you.
Yeah, so it's confusing, but I got that, which is there's a higher level thing, in layman's terms, there's a higher level thing that says we could be given all this authority, but this is the maximum possible. So they couldn't give us some authority that doesn't exist in that list. But within that list, they can say, but we're only going to give you authority to do this and this. And so they certainly haven't given us authority to review employees the airport is going to hire. They've just said, in that particular case, to advise on the appointment of the airport director, who is sitting here. So obviously we advised, and the thumbs up on that. So there's kind of the higher level stuff, and then there's of those, what they chose to give us powers of, and that's what you just described.
That's a very good example. Here's the maximum of what council can give you, and they've just given you this much.
Got it. I'm clear on that. I know. I'm done. Okay.
I have when you have here, how does it all work together? And you point out that the airport director, I believe it is, brings contracts, leases, programs that require council approval to the commission, et cetera. The way this, and I think the previous one was worded, would imply that the airport staff and director, do all the work and then bring it here for approval. There's nothing, I presume, that prevents the staff and the commission from the commission for giving some input maybe early on in a program or something of that nature to say, this is what we think you ought to be doing, and then they would come back maybe with a program or a lease along those lines, or maybe something separate.
So with regards to programs and operations that is within your purview to implement programs, absolutely, staff would probably be coming early on a conceptual level to get your input, especially if it's a larger project, and then this is how we're thinking of it. This is what we're doing, but then I think maybe your motion for the transient parking, yes. That's an example of that. You've given some direction, and so the staff can come back to you and say, here's kind of what we've come up with. Now we need further direction to either try and implement a policy or get direction. With regards to contracts and leases, it's a little bit, staff needs to negotiate that as part of their duties for the operation of the airport. That's Henry's responsibility that he directs through his staff. And they come to you after they've negotiated the terms, and both sides are in support of those terms. And the reason for that is because it's not a good idea to negotiate a lease or anything. Once the terms are good and we come to you, then if you start nitpicking, it's perfectly understandable you say, you know what, I'm going to deny this lease because I for some reason there's something that we feel as a group is unfavorable to the airport. Remembering that your role is to advise and look after the safekeeping of this gem that we have, that we're lucky to have as a city, and Goleta's probably is jealous of. So,
thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Am I correct on this comments and input by the commission that when we get to subject or to item 10, the redevelopment project update, this would be the time for the commission to voice its input?
Yes, with regards to the scope of what has been set out in the agenda. I haven't looked necessarily at the agenda, so you're limited to what that's been agendized for. And I can help you when we get there. I'd have to get back to the desk to look at the agenda. But yeah, you need to stay within whatever is publicly noticed. The reason for that is you may, if it's outside of what Director Thompson was going to talk about, and you started talking about it, it may have been something that would have been really interesting to the other members of the public, and they would have have been here had they known that you were going to discuss it. And it gives them the opportunity to give you their public comment. That's why we have the agendas and we notice them the way that we do, because we want to make sure that the public understands what you're going to be discussing so that they can comment to you as well.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Just as a follow-up there, Tava, so I really am not that smart. So in layman's terms, which is one of my favorite kind of comments, as these subjects come up where you're doing a presentation and we have questions, what I get from what you just said in layman's terms is, by and large, although there isn't going to be a whip that's going to whip us, but by and large, the interactive conversation that's happening, for instance, right now, needs to stay within the scope of the agenda item, and it really cannot wander very far beyond that, because if it did, then we'd be having a discussion that the public should have been noticed would have been having. Is that?
Yes, accurate.
Thank you.
This may be one of those inappropriate questions, but while we're talking about administrative type issues, there were two. What is, and maybe this is for commission input also, the policy or the practice to add an item to an agenda? Now, we did that earlier where I had sent an email to the director and he made the comment, would you like to add an item to next month's agenda? But outside of a commission meeting, if I wanted to add something to an upcoming agenda, how would I do that? What would the process be?
So watch how I craftily bring this back into the roles and responsibilities so we stay within our agenda item. So
yes. Whose role is
if it's within your purview and it's set forth within something that you would be giving approval to, programs, contracts, what you need to do is it's a good idea to let the chair know that this is an agenda item that you would like to have on the agenda, and then let Henry know as well. And then at the meeting, go ahead, you can just let the chair know and he'll make an opening for you. You can make a motion to put something on the agenda. The reason we do it at the meeting and then for a future item is so that the public's aware of that it's happening. So something just doesn't pop up all of a sudden on an agenda item. And it makes sure that it's not just an issue or a concern of a single member, that there's other members of this commission that also think it's an item worth putting on the agenda and considering, because we want it for agenda efficiency and staff efficiency. We want to make sure that at least the majority of you want the staff to give you a presentation and that you want to hear about this kind of issue.
So basically, if any of us wish to add an agenda item, we need to add a meeting for a subsequent meeting.
That's the best way to do it, yes.
Okay, and then the second role and responsibility question is canceling of meetings. What role does the commission have in deciding whether or not meetings are to be canceled?
That's really more of a staff issue. If we don't have anything that we can put on the agenda, then, or it's not ready, then the meeting will be canceled. Generally, that's going to be working through the chair to let him know what is happening.
Okay, I just find it interesting. I would say that there is probably never a month in which this commission couldn't get information or give information associated with the running of the airport with all of the
So maybe
projects that we have going.
Maybe I'd suggest that's a great topic to take offline with Tava.
Sure.
It sounds like we're starting to kind of wander.
Okay.
Yeah, why don't you give me an email, shoot me an email, and we can talk over the, set a time to talk over the phone, or we can just email back and forth if you want.
Thank you.
Are you done, Tava?
I'm done if you're done.
Does anybody else have any questions?
Jason has a question.
Would you mind if I'm recognized for a quick moment?
I don't think absolutely you're recognized.
Thank you.
Mr. Dominguez. I tried to think of something funny to say, but it's too late.
So that was a great presentation, and I don't know if you know my background. I was a city attorney in LA and then a county council here in Santa Barbara when I moved up here, and I think that was just really spot on. That was one of the best presentations I've seen in terms of clarifying those roles and responsibilities. I was elected to a board when I was 16 years old, so 32 years ago, and I've been on boards ever since, and then I was an executive director. So I've been in both sides of, I guess, the room. And another layman's term that I would throw out there is nose in, fingers out. So ask a lot of questions, but these are the people who are going to do the day-to-day, week-to-week, month-to-month operations. So the other thing is just a practical rule. Always call Henry when you have questions. If in doubt, talk to him, because he's kind of the one you want to channel things through, not staff. Even not necessarily Tava, because we want her to be busy with the other 14 departments that she's servicing. But I always go to him first with informal. We'd love this on the agenda, because he can do it. I think she's right. The best way is if you do it here. But if he happens to miss something that's of general concern, he has the authority to put it on the agenda. So he can explain to you why, hey, as a general rule, we don't put it on the agenda, and here's why. Or as a general rule, we do, and here's why. So always feel free to email him as soon as you think there's a question, a concern, or an issue that you have or constituents might have. So that's my 2.5 cents. Since I'm here at this meeting, I'm going to throw it out there. You know, as a liaison, and maybe you could talk about my role as liaison, but really I'm here as a conduit for information to take to the council from you and vice versa, and between you and staff, if there's any issues I can help with in terms of communication. So I don't regularly come to meetings. I come every once in a while just to check in. But you guys can always feel free to call me. But again, I think the best bet is always talk to Henry first. And things have been going very smoothly, and I think you guys are doing a great job working with what's a pretty new staff, at least. We have a few newer members. I guess time flies, and you guys have all getting beyond the first year, but I think we've got a pretty seasoned group of all of you all. So just let me know if there's anything I can do or take to council at any point in time.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Councilmember Dominguez, and thanks, Tava. Alrighty, the item number 7, the 2018 Integrated and Riveting Pest Management Report. Oh, I'm sorry. That's right. So we do allow public comment at the end of each one of these. Go ahead and stand up, though. So.
As far as the lease negotiations, I really like the fact that maybe the council would be given a draft copy of the lease negotiations, because I want to be them informed as opposed to getting a final lease just to sign or say yay or nay. Because I respect that your job is to look over things and advise. And I don't know how you can advise if you're not given some piece of that.
Thanks,
Right.
Captain.
I think you hit on a crucial point that we're going to start doing more lease review subcommittee meetings.
When appropriate.
Yes.
Now, onto the riveting pest management report. And obviously, I think all of this is important. I'm just trying to bring some levity because it is 8 o'clock.
Good evening again, Commissioners. I'm Jeff McKee, the Facilities Manager, here to give you the IPM Annual Report for 2018, last year's results. So my outline, I'll let you know a little bit about IPM, describe what it is, and then let you know what our pesticide and alternative uses were in 2018. Also compare the airport's use to the citywide use of pesticides, and then ask for your recommendation or accept the report. It will eventually go on to council. Both Parks and Rec and Airport Commission accept the report before it goes to council. So as far as background, integrated pest management is the use of the least toxic approach to control pests with the goal of reducing the amount and toxicity of pesticides applied. So the city has a IPM program in 2004, so it's been going for 15 years now. There's a citizen IPM committee, advisory committee. Greg Chittick, Kristen Labonte, and Larry Saltzman serve on that committee, so we meet with them on a regular basis. Parks and Rec Department kind of leads the IPM effort for the city, develops the report, holds those meetings with the IPM committee, and does a good job. I appreciate their help and putting the report together. The city's IPM program also categorizes pesticides, so it categorizes materials on the basis of toxicity criteria. And so those pesticides also include herbicides, plant pests, as well as insect pests and so forth. So the green materials are kind of the least toxic materials, yellow kind of mid, and the red or special circumstances are the most toxic chemicals. There's also a pesticide hazard and exposure reduction FAIR zones. So that process maps areas, similarly green, yellow, and red. Those green areas are highly, they have a high possibility of exposure for human and sensitive habitat. So we want to use the least toxic chemicals in those areas, where a special circumstance red area is less likely to impact either human or sensitive human beings or sensitive habitat. So the green chemicals can only go in the green areas and up to red chemicals in the red areas under FAIR. So airport pests primarily are mosquitoes, weeds, and rodents. Mosquitoes are monitored and treated by the mosquito and vector management districts of Santa Barbara. So Goleta Slough is a significant source of those mosquitoes, impacts UCSB. Important that we keep those under control as they're a potential disease vector. So in 2018, we applied 354.7 pounds of the green material Vectobac G, which is a BTI, Bacillus thuringiensis material, and then Alticid XR, which is a methoprene-based extended release material. So they apply the Alticid when it's dry in the summertime to control the mosquitoes that come in when we get flooding in the basins in the slough. And then the Vectobac is used to clean up as the extended release diminishes in effectiveness through the season. As far as weeds on the airfield, we use chemical control for vegetation that obscures airfield lights and signs. We use minor amounts on Hollister Island, the traffic islands there to control weeds, and that product is Roundup Pro Max. We used 56 gallons. It's yellow material. And I want to talk a little bit more about Pro Max since glyphosate has been in the news lately. It's still the least toxic, effective product for weed control that we have. We have an approved materials list as part of the IPM program. It's still the least toxic thing on there. And I wanted to point out that it's available in retail settings nationwide, used in agriculture. However, the retail settings, those people are unlicensed and untrained, obviously homeowners. For airport use, we protect the applicators in the environment by applying the minimum amount. We use just a very minimal amount. We hand spray targeted and use the lowest percentage, best efficacy we can to use the minimum amount of material. Our applicators are trained and licensed, and we ensure that they're using their personal protective equipment. So we're minimizing the impact to the applicator, and that's where the main concern is to the applicator. Moving on to rodents, they're an attractant for prey animals, so it's a potential, those prey animals are a potential aircraft strike hazard, so we want to reduce rodents so that we reduce the prey animals. They're also a disease vector. For rats and mice, I didn't explain that outside of the airfield, basically everything's mapped as green. So we're using all green materials except for the Hollister Island outside the airfield fence. So we're trapping rats and mice with mechanical traps. Gophers and ground squirrels, we use a diphacinone-based bait, which is a multi-feed bait. It's a yellow material. We used 100 pounds last year. And then as far as alternative efforts, so that's things that we do in lieu of spraying. So mechanical weed control, we did 648 hours documented last year. Rodent abatement, 124 hours. And then we used 17 hours applying mulch. So as far as comparing the airport use to the citywide use, in 2018, airport didn't use any red materials. So those are things we've used in the past, like fumitoxin on the airfield. And if we're tinting a building, that's a red material also. So none of that in 2018. We used 99% of the yellow materials applied citywide. And you saw those big numbers for mosquitoes in the slough. That's driving most of that number, but also the 56 gallons and 100 pounds of the rodents. So 99% that was used citywide is used at the airport. Also 85%, that's the BTI-based material that's used to control mosquitoes. So I'm asking for your recommendation that Airport Commission accept the Santa Barbara Integrated Pest Management Strategy 2018 annual report that was prepared in February of 2019. And I'm available if you have any questions.
I've got a question. So it's 78 man-days doing mechanical weed abatement. That's somebody walking around pulling weeds or whacking them with some sort of device.
Chair Archer, yes.
And how do we, I mean, it's a big airport, so, you know, you cut them down over here and they're growing over there. So, you know, one member of the public commented, you know, that weeds were, you know, this high. How do you, obviously you do the best you can, but do you kind of, do you have a pattern of going around the airport, or do you go where there's, quote, hot spots where weeds have gotten, you know, grown faster than you expected?
Our main focus is the airfield, so it's lights and signs on the airfield. That's, you know, public safety, right. So I would say, I don't have the number exactly, but I would say 54 of those gallons were devoted to spraying the airfield light lanes. Some of our light lanes are not paved, so that requires more material to keep those lights and signs visible.
Question. Do we have any type of procedure for, say, user reporting weed problems? Is there a particular number they should call? Or just tell the tower, I can't read the taxiway sign? Would you tell the city to please cut them down? Or what's the preferred way?
So our operations staff does twice daily inspections of the airfield, and they send a report to the facilities division asking us to take care of those weeds. I think that reporting probably to operations is the best way to do that.
Okay, because that might help. Certainly, I realize that's active taxiways and runways, but I guess I'm more concerned with ramp areas that seem to be, shall we say, left chance.
The leasehold areas are the responsibility of the leaseholder.
Okay.
So those ramps that are operated by the airport are the responsibility of the airport.
Good point.
Thank you.
Good point.
Yep. And then just congratulations. As the person who sits on a second story in a building overlooking a large area, I routinely, for many years, watched the airport staff mowing it down, and the swampy areas there produce no mosquitoes. So, well done.
Thank you.
Is there any public comment on that report? I didn't think so. So do we have a motion to accept the Santa Barbara Integrated Pest Management Strategy as delivered by Mr. McKee?
Yeah, I motion that we do.
Second.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you, Jeffrey.
Thank you.
Next, we have a number of agreements, or actually two, to be precise. Lease agreement with Dean's. Well, you're going to make a report. You're going to make a report on each of these, correct?
Yeah.
Okay. Deanna, so a report on the lease agreement with Dean's.
Alrighty. Good evening, as we're getting later into the evening, I should say. We have actually two lease items this evening, and to tie into Tava's earlier presentation, the lease negotiations for these leases are, of course, negotiated within the parameters that the commission establishes once a year. So it's one of those things that Tava pointed out, is that every year you approve the lease rates for our commercial properties as well as our commercial airline rates. So that's sort of the guiding parameter that we work from, and really the only time that we really try to call attention to something of specific interest would be if we, for some reason, are deviating outside of that, and that would most notably be if it was something that was less than the lease rates or the range of lease rates that you've approved. But in this case tonight, both of these actions are within those parameters. And these are also two leases that fall squarely within your realm of final approval. So they are two leases that are 5 years or less. And so we, of course, have had examples at our last meeting, Send Seekers Engineering, who we approved for a building across the street. That was a 10-year lease. So that lease is now subsequently, after your recommendation, is going to City Council for approval. So there's that distinction. We had a good example here. So we have two leases. These are both at the 6100 Hollister development. And the first one is a business that will be called Dean's. And the map is obviously attached to your packet, which thank you, Commissioner Kahn, for pointing that out last month, that we needed to include those. And here also, so you can see where this is. This is the corner anchor food and beverage location on Hollister and Lopez. So this is being proposed as a lease to a company called Dean's. It's a sole proprietorship. It's a concept that is established by a local food service company called Lunchbox. Perhaps some folks are familiar with it. They have a commercial kitchen at Earl Warren's Showgrounds. The business has been in business for over 10 years, so it's a solid business. The concept here is to provide lunch and a coffee shop for the area clientele, so primarily folks that are working in the area here. Obviously, they will build it out as a coffee shop. Most of the major food prep will take place at the commercial kitchen over at Earl Warren Showgrounds. This is really a perfect scenario for us because we couldn't have any frying or something that required an extensive amount of venting in that location. The lease term is proposed at 5 years. The rent would increase every year by CPI or 3.9% at the bottom end of that range. The square footage is $1.65. No, excuse me, this is Dean's. This is $1.94. So I've now given you a tip on the next one. $1.94 per square foot, which is in the range of a retail rental rate. So monthly rent will be $4,290 plus utilities and common area maintenance charge. So that's landscaping and general upkeep of the area. I'd ask for Teva's input here before I go to the next item. Should I ask for a recommendation on this one, or should I continue on?
Well, we have it as two separate items.
It's two separate items? Okay.
So I have, are you done with that one? So I have a question. This was one of the spots over there that was a little special, meaning we were looking for a specific kind of tenant, and which we now are proposing. And it's a two-part question. So, well, assuming that both of these are approved, where does that put us occupancy with all those spaces over there?
Yeah, and that's to Commissioner Hobson's questions as well. So including this location and the location for the next proposed lease, we will have space still available in building number 5. We'll have one space, not a whole building, one space still available in number 3, and then the back side of this location on number 1. Now, most of those actually have folks that are in some stage of negotiation with us, but they don't have lease proposals that are approved by commission at this point.
Okay. Does anybody have any questions on this lease?
Yes. Following up on that, do we have occupancy and rental payments on those that we have leases on yet, or is that a pending?
Commissioner Hopkins, they vary depending upon the kinds of tenant improvements that they're doing in the space. I know that we have one space that's occupied by a cleaning company called ServPro. They didn't really have any substantive tenant improvements that they wanted to do in the space. We have other tenants that are actually outfitting office space. So they are in the process of design and permitting. So in the case of this concept here, this concept will be in the process of design and permitting for a while. So we probably won't see actual occupancy until close to the end of the year for this one.
And then there's no rent payment until occupancy, or how do we handle that?
In this case, yes, the rent commencement, so the lease commencement is September 1st, rent commencement is January 1st. So that's presuming that they're able to occupy the space by January 1st. We don't offer a tenant improvement, as a public agency, so that's sort of the way that we can facilitate a tenant being able to come in and have that outlay of capital before they have any income coming in.
And where's the parking? If you go back to the map, where's the parking for this?
The parking is in the back. It's in the back. It's actually a little bit cut off here, but you can see, and there is actually some on the side.
Okay.
So the side and behind. So
Okay.
the patio is facing the street.
Okay, do you have any idea what hours they're planning to operate?
I believe it's 6 a.m. in the morning till 6 in the evening.
Oh, okay. And lastly, you mentioned Lunchbox as a facility that's in the Earl Warren Showgrounds.
They
As
have a
kitchen.
commercial kitchen.
Where does the food that they cook there normally go other than before this?
It's primarily a catering business.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, they're very big into catering. But Lunchbox is the owner of Dean's, which is the new concept.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Yeah. Have they run any brick and mortar type of restaurants or coffee shops?
They haven't run a restaurant where they've actually cooked food on site that they have then subsequently served to people. So this is actually somewhat similar if you think about it. The food prep is really taking place at Earl Warren. It's being transported here, and then it's being served in that location. So there's really not going to be much cooking going on in this space, and there can't be.
We don't have anything to look at in terms of something that they've run or designed or done signage for from the street or anything else.
Other than their commercial kitchen at Earl Warren, and you can see there, obviously, you can take a look at their website and see the operations that they've had in the past. You can. Yeah.
Thanks.
Would it be correct to say that this is kind of on the model of what Starbucks does? They bring in pre-packaged foods and they present it in a case, and they will make you various custom coffees and drinks, but what you're actually getting is nothing they cooked there.
Commissioner Khan, I think that's fair to assume. I think there will be some warming that will go on in this space because that can be done without any sort of venting. So convection ovens, modern convection ovens can warm food, but it's actually prepared off-site and warmed on-site.
Do they propose to offer the same type of coffee service that we would hope would be there for the tenants and surrounding?
Yes, absolutely.
Because that's
absolutely.
what people want.
So it'll be espresso coffee, yes.
Thank you.
Following up on Ms. Goodman's, this organization or this individual obviously has a great deal of experience in preparing meals and catering. But if I understand right, this will be his or her first experience in an actual coffee shop where people walk in off the street and get something as opposed to doing a catering business.
It's a first retail location, yes.
Okay.
So they have to actually sell something to somebody who walks in, not fulfill an order that they have received from a group or company who wishes to have a catered X, Y, or Z.
Correct. I mean, it is a retail location with food that is prepared off-site, yes.
So what if it doesn't work out? What if nobody shows up or not enough people show up? What happens to the airport? What happens to the tenant?
The tenant is making a 5-year commitment to a lease. So it's a contractual arrangement like any other. They're committing, we're making a commitment. And if it doesn't work out, then obviously you end up in a negotiation with a tenant. They still have to fill their responsibilities to live out the lease term.
Okay.
And Commissioner Hopkins, I would add that I think it's fair to say that this is the type of tenant we were looking for, what was envisioned to allow someone to start up a business and grow from there. So we feel it's a good fit.
And one last, the back half, what, I missed the grand opening. I was not here during the grand opening. So what is the back half of that aimed for?
Yeah, the back half of that space is designated as retail slash service. So that could be a business services location. It could be a bank. It could be any number of sort of retail service type locations.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Does any member of the public that's still awake have any comments? Great. So we have, you're looking for a recommendation that we approve and authorize. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
A second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? One down, one to go. Ms. Deanna again?
Alrighty. The second proposed tenant is a company called Big Sale Group, Inc., and they are an internet retailer. They retail closeout, overstock, and liquidated merchandise. You can find them on the internet. They sell a lot of merchandise through eBay. They're currently based in San Luis Obispo. They've been in business for a good while. And that space, which I believe is around 2,000 square feet, is storage, offices, and it's going to be a fulfillment center for them. So in this case, it's a proposed 2-year lease with 3 one-year options. The per square foot lease rate, as I mentioned before, is $1.65 a square foot, which is within the range for that use. And you can see the monthly rent plus utilities and common area maintenance charge. So it's a good use for that particular type of space. The map you can see here, they are, this is building 3, I believe, towards the street. If you recall from the grand opening, there is a center area that has some ornamentation and artwork, and it's just to the east of that. So one of those spaces.
Question?
Go ahead.
So it doesn't look like they really have delivery spaces close by, looking at that map. How are they moving
Well,
this merchandise in and out?
Oh.
Are there bulk items?
Well, all of those locations have roll-up doors. You can't see it very easily on the map, but, and I'm not sure if this pointer will actually work right. Oops, no, that wasn't the right thing to do. You know, that's the worst thing that can happen. You push a button and you don't know what you get. Well, now I got the pointer. Okay, so that's great. I will tell you there is a roll-up door with a bay, and this is shining red now, so maybe it doesn't work, on the east side here. So where it looks to be somewhat open there, that's where you can back up a truck to load. So there is space for that.
Do we assume they don't expect a lot of foot traffic, that they're primarily going to be boxing things and sending them away to fulfill orders as opposed to expecting a large...
Exactly. They're not a retail business, so they should not be expecting much foot traffic. We have a little mixture of different types of businesses in here, some that will expect more foot traffic than others, but this one should not.
Do we have any idea how many employees they anticipate?
Unfortunately, I do not know how many employees that they have. It's a small company, but...
So I was just a little curious there on the front half, which if I recall right, the front half is more expensive than the back half.
Slightly, yes.
And I would have expected the front half to be more desirable for people who wanted an appearance along the road and access. Was that their choice?
That was their choice, and perhaps it's the better view of the road.
Fine.
Yeah.
More for it. We're happy.
Yeah.
Anybody else on the commission with any questions on this? Anybody out in the audience that's still awake? Nope. Okay. So we have a recommendation that we approve and authorize you to execute this lease. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And any opposed? Nope. Okay. And last, but absolutely not least, thanks, Deanna.
You're welcome.
Who's going to give this report, by the way? Henry?
Deanna will.
Deanna, oh, well, you were
Also
going to say
standing
that, okay.
right here, and
You are the star. So Deanna's going to give us a FBO redevelopment project update, and thank you for the, with the graphic here of the process.
You're very welcome. Alrighty, finally to the United Right, thank you. Alrighty, I am, despite the hour, very excited to be able to provide you with an update on one of the most complex projects that this airport is likely to undertake since the design and construction of the new airline terminal. In fact, in some ways, it's likely to be, I think the slide is moving without me. I think in some ways it's likely to be more complex because we are going to be selecting private fixed base operators who will develop not only their own vision for this airport, but also the vision of the aviation community here that the facility will serve. And we're excited about this project. We know it's going to make a lasting difference for this airport. At a minimum, it's going to be developing facilities that will last for the next 30 years to serve private aviation, and we are happy for your continued support in this important work. So while the development is complex, I'm going to try to keep this presentation pretty close to the ground. I'm going to recap the progress to date on the work, detail where we are today and what we're doing, and also because perhaps this is the most mysterious part of the process for most people, I want to talk about the process leading up to the issuance of a request for proposals through the competitive selection and right to the jumping off point to design and construction for the future FBO development. It's possible that there's some technical questions that may pop up here this evening and that I might not be able to answer. But we have lots of engineers and stormwater experts around the airport, so I'm happy to take those questions for a later time that can be answered. So first of all, I wanted to go through a bit of what has been done already. I need to reverse a couple of dates here because I realized that we actually started working on the FBO redevelopment project before the master plan was formally adopted in November of 2017. So November 2017, these preliminary leasehold areas, and I believe you all have this graphic for reference. Those preliminary leasehold areas were defined in the master plan. The locations and sort of the maximum footprint of the future FBOs were defined there.
Deanna, can I interrupt you for a minute? I'm so sorry. Mo, if you can hear me out there, I think we need 2 or 3 more copies of the map.
We have some more right there on the desk. Thank you.
Thanks, Aaron. I want to take it with me. Sorry to interrupt you,
Oh,
Deanna.
no worries. So that was approved in November of 17. Actually, in July of 17, that's when we issued the RFQ for the FBO redevelopment project consultant. And then in October of 17, we selected Lee Fisher as our planning consultant, which you have seen them come here before and make presentations of their work. So in January then of 18, we started the baseline work, which was a situation analysis and a benchmarking study. That was basically looking at other FBO facilities that were comparable, looking at what facilities they had, looking at the availability of our facilities versus other comparable facilities, and also a little bit at the financial side of things, how we compared as far as what we were able to command in the form of rates and charges and rents and that kind of thing. So they completed that analysis in June of last year, and we provided you then with an update of that work in August. Then we went back and started looking at the scope of the rest of the planning work with Lee Fisher. And so that's, after we've just carved off that front piece, then really looked from here all the way on out to the execution of lease agreements with future tenants. So we came back in November, talked to you about that. We gave you a revised timeline at that point because we had done enough work with Lee Fisher at that point to really understand the complexity of the project we were embarking on. Part of that was understanding the complexity of the RFP process, but part of it was also understanding the actual development site that we had to work with. And Lee Fisher were very helpful in the sense of being able to bring into it their experience of FBO developments at other airports and some of the struggles and difficulties that they had encountered at those airports. So in January, we took the next step, which was launching the development plan. And that's what I'm going to talk to you a little bit about tonight, the work that we've done there, and outline that. We realized then around that time, early this spring, that this process, the RFP process, the planning work that goes in ahead of the RFP process is so complicated that we wanted to try to find a way to visualize it in a way that was digestible by anybody who wanted to try to examine it. So that is the other diagram that you have in front of it. It does look kind of like a game board. There's really nothing humorous about it other than to try to show that it is a looping route with many turns in it. In June, Lee Fisher was then completed their draft development plan, and we started really working actively with that plan in June through just meetings that we had last week. So we're continually working with the material that they provided us. So now we're coming back to you with sort of a status report where we're at, and we're looking at some of these baseline assumptions that we provided with the consultant. And we expect that within the next number of weeks, we'll have a revision to this development plan for further work. So on to the next slide, I'll talk to you here specifically about the redevelopment, the development plan as part of this. So here's the components that were in it. One, looking at the existing facility inventory, and there's more description, of course, in your memo about that. It's basically looking at all of the FBO facilities that are currently on the field, what their condition is, what their use is, what their likely future lifespan is, the likelihood that a future FBO would want to or be able to use. The site engineering analysis. This is where you get into the nitty-gritty of what kind of dirt do we have out there? What kind of utilities do we have underground to support future hangars? The floodplain, of course. In some sense, we couldn't be in a worse spot. And really just looking at what are the challenges going to be to build on this spot, to put down the concrete that needs to be put down, build the facilities that need to be built there, and what's it going to cost? Because all of those things drive costs. Then we looked at the validation of the general aviation demand forecast from the master plan, because the footprints that you see from the master plan were based on some assumptions about demand. So we needed to check in and see where we were in that regard. Then they did provide us with some very initial development concepts based on a hypothetical mix of aircraft, hypothetical hangar configuration, what it could look like, and of course there's some very complicated intersections with where taxiways are and where helipads are and those kind of things. So just the first sort of look at what could this look like. The one thing that really wasn't in the development plan but is sort of a natural offshoot of that was the preliminary financial projections. Because as soon as you start looking at this, you realize that there are numbers tied behind all of this. And what is the feasibility of actually doing this? And just taking a look at a high level, which of course had not been done previously as part of the master plan, does this pencil out? And I'll show you our spots right there. So these are the parcels that were contemplated as part of the master plan, two essentially 23 acre parcels. So transitioning then to what this meant for us, I'll put this back up here for a second. When Lee Fisher first came back to us with their draft development plan, one of the things that we really realized is that we had provided them with a number of assumptions that they used to derive some of their conclusions, their preliminary conclusions. And they essentially fed those right back at us. And when we looked at some of those assumptions, we realized that, we really need to take a close look and make sure that these are still valid. make sure that that some of these assumptions that we may have contemplated quite some time ago still really work for this project, and if not, what else do we need to contemplate? So that's where we sort of transitioned into what we're doing right now. We're examining some of those accepted assumptions, and I'll give you a perfect example of that. One of the assumptions is that this office building moves, and it's an assumption that we all have. We get it back to us and we look at it and we think, okay, so what is it going to cost to relocate this building? Is that feasible? Does that work for a future FBO development? Start asking some of those questions. So, and actually plugging some of those things into the financial model, because if it's assumed that we're relocating this office, it doesn't happen for free, and how does that cost get borne? So the assessment of the capital investment requirements is really key here, because one of the things that came back, not surprising, is that it requires a lot of capital investment. Just as a quick example, it's in the floodway. I think we can all guess that anything that's going to be built out there is going to have to be elevated probably 3 feet above the current level. And we know that the soil out there is not very good soil. So that's just one example. So they came back with some initial estimates of capital investments that were a little on the daunting side. You have to look at it realistically. And some we felt they may even be underestimating based on our own experience here in Santa Barbara, what it costs to build. They validated the demand forecast. That could be a whole separate presentation by Andrew Bermond in and of itself. But we did see a healthy uptick in GA operations in 2018, but still we're tracking below the master plan assumptions for GA demand. And we looked at really the first set of likely financial returns, both to presumptive FBO operators and to the airport. And they looked fairly modest. Honestly, I can't say that we necessarily had specific expectations. And of course, Lee Fisher says they can still fall within a range. We could do better than that. But it sort of raised a flag for us that, okay, we need to take a serious look at what we think the financial returns might be, given the investment costs, given what we estimate the operating costs are likely to be, et cetera. So, and then as a final overlay to this work is considering some of the conditions that have changed, even within the last couple of years. As an easy example, 3 years ago, we probably had maybe 3 or 4 remain overnight aircraft. We're looking at pretty soon having 9 remain overnight aircraft on the commercial aviation side. We are really struggling for ramp space to park commercial aircraft. So that's also looking at taking that into consideration. And are there certain areas that perhaps the airport needs to consider that we may need to retain control of if we continue to grow on the commercial side? So looking at that. So again, we have some uncertainty about some of the existing facilities. That would be this office building. There is an uncertainty, of course, now if you look at the map and you see that the parcel for the restaurant is carved out. It's not part of the master plan or the FBO redevelopment plan. We don't know what's going to happen there. Our site conditions are complex. We need to do some more work at looking at that. We're going to continue to look at the capital investment, hone in on those assumptions, and really look at some realistic financial returns so that we understand that perhaps what we need to do to look at is, given the GA demand that we have a phased development. So we know, for example, right now that our current demand would not justify 2 23-acre parcels being developed. So can we have a phased development that develops to a forecast at a certain point, and then looking at 2045, a second phase of development, which would also be helpful, of course, when it comes to the capital investment of the future providers. So, and then of course looking at some of our airfield challenges, not only just on the commercial side, but we also have some challenges with where our taxiways and lie, and some of the other considerations that we need to take there. So what we are doing now with Lee Fisher, they're going back and looking at further financial analysis for total costs. They're going to assess the total leasehold size, if this is the right assumption, or if it needs to be phased, if phasing is the right way to go, and what that could look like. So I'd like to just transition now to talking about the RFP. We've been here a long time tonight, and I could probably go through every step of this, and that would keep us here even longer. But you have your diagram in front of you, which looks like this. And really, if you look at this diagram, we tried to communicate it in such a way that it's not necessarily that we go from one step to another. There is an element of 2 steps forward, 3 steps back. You know, there's a little back and forth. Essentially, if you can relate what I've just sort of been talking about, we're really in the phase of, you know, assessing our needs, testing our assumptions, coming up with some proposals, some ideas that we can then vet with a broader group of stakeholders in what we call a charrette. And that's really talking about what we think the future needs are going to be, and gaining some input from those that really benefit from the facility. Eventually, at some point, we'll come up with what we believe to be a preferred plan. In the meantime, though, this is back and forth, we have our existing FBO leases that are coming due at the end of May next year. So we obviously need to plan for continuity of operations there and come up with a game plan for that. Then you can see that there's quite a bit of work that we need to do when it comes to estimating primarily investment costs and financial returns. All of those things we need to articulate in the RFP in order for the responders to come back to us with knowledgeable, realistic, and feasible proposals to us. So the better the information we put out, the better information that we get back. And then we're working towards creating the RFP document, as you can see there. One of the things that we plan to do as part of this process is we plan to have a pre-qualifications phase, because we know that the financial commitment and the term is going to be significant. We want to make sure that everybody who's in the final RFP process is actually able to compete for the opportunities. So you can see that around step 5. And then if you move into step 6, here, this is really meat of an RFP process, where the structure that you put into the RFP process at that point is key. We have to establish clear procurement rules. There's a note here about a cone of silence. At some point, we're no longer really talking about it outwardly, because we need to be concerned about influencing the process in an undue way. And there's a run-up to the actual point in time. We issue the proposal or issue the RFP, and then we're sharing information with the potential proposers. So we're answering questions. We're providing them performas that they can fill out, so they'll ultimately be comparing apples to apples. And then at some point, everyone goes away for a period of time. They prepare their proposals. We have a deadline. They arrive here. And then, of course, we have already established the criteria by which we're evaluating these proposals, and we'll have a selection panel that will evaluate those proposals, and that panel will have to be very carefully chosen. It's not going to be Henry. It's not going to be me. In all likelihood, it's going to be folks that have no specific interest in the outcome of this, in order to protect the integrity of the process. That panel will, of course, evaluate them, score them. We'll all be excited the day when we announce an outcome, but then we will hope that there is no form of protest of the outcome. And we all know that this is going to be a very competitive process, which is why we are taking so many methodical steps to avoid that possibility. Because if we end up with a protest or a lawsuit after the announcement, we very well end up going back to a much earlier stage of the process, and we face delay, and none of us want to do that. If we pass that hurdle, we can try to negotiate terms with successful proposers and execute a contract. And really, at that point, that's really the starting point, because at that point, then we're talking about design and construction. So you can see an expected timeline here, and I think we broached this timeline in November of last year, and it hasn't changed. It hasn't changed. We really think that the RFP, the issuance of the RFP, is probably in the 2021 timeframe. And in the meantime, we're going to be doing all this methodical work behind the scenes to make sure that we're putting out the best possible request for proposals document for the best possible outcome. So tried to get in there succinctly. Could have talked about this for quite a long time, but I am happy to take your questions at this point. Yes, ma'am.
About how many RFPs are we expecting to be returned?
Commissioner Goodman, that's a good question. There are quite a number of companies out in the marketplace, and they fall into different categories. Some are international fixed base operators, some are national, and some are regional. We don't have any local FBOs. I would expect that we could see competition from each category of those. So we could conceivably, we could end up between 5-10 proposals perhaps. It will be competitive because, of course, we expect that our two incumbents will compete. So you've got two right there,
right.
And so you know that there'll be more than that.
Great, thanks.
The charrettes that you have listed here, do you have an approximate date for that?
Well, we were hoping to have that happen in the fall. We're hoping to have enough of a developed concept, or at least two preliminary concepts, to be able to bring something meaningful to a group to talk about. So that's definitely, I know that is Henry's hope that we will have something to bring forth in the fall.
Okay. The rest of these are mostly comments or suggestions for incorporation in the process. Going through your item, I understand what you're saying about this building and the expense of moving all of you folks someplace, but I would like to suggest, my opinion is that's a crucial part of turning this building over to the FBOs is a very significant item that I believe would substantially enhance the value to them to have a airside, street side with lots of parking, big, beautiful a building, not the kind that we have now due to other things. The site analysis, site engineering analysis, was there anything, I mean, when we developed this master plan, we knew that we were dealing with a floodway or a floodplain and soil that probably would need pillars all the way down to bedrock. Has anything changed there, or is there new information, or is that just you're basically repeating what we had before?
Well, Commissioner Hopkins, without having a lot of detailed knowledge about what it is that you fleshed out before, these folks were they're specifically committed to FBO development, so they had a lot of input when it came to looking at other airports that faced similar soil conditions. I believe Long Beach was one that they looked at specifically, and just some of the challenges that they ran into in dealing with similar types of conditions. Probably the baseline understanding of those conditions is likely fairly simple.
Okay. You mentioned the problem with the remain overnight aircraft. I didn't realize how much it had jumped up. The original master plan had the concept that once the FBO on the south side had moved, that the area south of the existing terminal would be used for expansion of the terminal if necessary and vehicle parking if necessary. I would hope that same space, if we had the choice, I'd rather put airplanes there on RON and cars across the street if we had to, rather than encroach on any of the ramp space on the north side of runway 25.
And I think that's going to be part of the analysis.
I know this was going to sound strange, but I was realizing that this is a 30-year project, and I happened to be seeing one of these many. We're going to have Ubers from here to there, in the air Ubers and all of the other things. And although right now they're all going to be available next year, we know, or maybe 2 years, which I'm pretty sure is not going to happen. But when you're looking out 10, 20, 30 years, I'd say it's a pretty good chance that whereas today the only helicopters practically that come in here are the only helicopters we get are the military. I would expect the number of vertical takeoff devices in this airport over the next 10, 20 years to be dramatically higher. So I would hope that Lee Fisher and the staff figures out how they would handle that in some fashion or another, just something to be taken into consideration. You mentioned the phased development. Again, in the original master plan, we laid out that 23 acres, but there was never a thought that an FBO would come in and build out the whole 23 acres immediately. The thinking was if you were to throw up that site, that most likely they would start on the Hollister side and start working out as the demand was there. If they put up a hangar and filled it up, then they'd go build another hangar. If they put up a hangar and nobody came, then they'd stop. So even though the diagram might have, let's say, 6 hangars, we would not expect the FBO to build 6 hangars until they were able to fill them up. So I think, again, that was part of the original concept, and certainly think that that's absolutely necessary, because we're not going to go from the few hangars and ramp space we have now to suddenly filling up all of that space. But I would hope that the RFP could be developed in a way so that the leases could be made, and we would coordinate with the FBOs to do that expansion. And then the last thing, I'm looking over at my attorney so that I don't get off the subject. The last item you have here is in September, the airport staff plans to initiate negotiations with the 2 current FBOs to maintain the continuity of operations. I'd like to make 2 comments. One is the sooner that gets done, the better, because everybody who is subleasing from the 2 FBOs, their contracts end May 20th. That neither of the FBOs can lease a hangar or a ramp or do anything with an end date more than 2020. So I think that's very important for a lot of people. And related to that is the original master plan idea for transient parking was the ramp west of 15 right. And I would like to ensure that as part of these negotiations, the airport not commit the west of 15 right to either FBO for a long term. 90 days, 180 days, something like that, but not the roughly 2 or 3 years that this would allow, because I would hope that we will get transient parking airport controlled and possibly airport tie downs prior to that time frame. And that's all of my comments.
Chair Curry, could I make a suggestion?
Yes.
Could we get through questions, assuming any of the commissioners have it, and then maybe open it up for public comment? I don't know if there is any, but that way.
Actually, is Jay Ritterbeck still here?
Yes, he is.
He is? Oh, there we are. Okay. So we haven't forgotten about you. So I have a couple of public comments. Do I have any other questions on the commission?
Chairman, my only question to Deanna is, this is great. Everyone's worked so hard, and you've done an outstanding job in this planning. But I still want you to just be thinking really big. Because I was in Aspen, Colorado about 3 weeks ago, and I counted 85 jets. And they must have been for an entire mile long. And I think we're going to get a lot more of these jets versus the general aviation propeller planes. are we big enough? Because Aspen's a destination as Santa Barbara is. And I just wonder if we have room to maybe park 50 jets in 5 years. My thoughts.
Let me just add to that comment. So first of all, I think we're limited in the amount of real estate that we have on airport property. And so that's part of the analysis that we are doing, is determining how much is the right amount for general aviation, FBOs, cargo, commercial. And that's based upon actual and forecasted activity here at the airport. So it's going to be a balancing act to determine the exact amount, but we're very much looking at that.
Thanks.
Kind of along those lines, this is huge. Is there enough of you for this?
Yeah.
Like, do we, I mean, seriously, do we have, this isn't the only thing you're working on.
Well, we have an excellent internal team that's starting to look at it, and we have a very good consultancy firm, Lee Fisher, that's helping us with a lot of the technical components of this project. It's pretty significant, but we're comfortable that we're handling it properly at this point.
So you feel at this point, from a staffing perspective, whether it's external consultants in some areas or internal staff, that you have enough of the right expertise available to tackle this thing?
Expertise, yes. I could use 10 more, though.
And just at a kind of a more personal, directed at you, you were previously at San Francisco Airport. During your tenure there, were there, I mean, SFO's always got something going on. So were you personally there in whatever capacity you were in during, and involved in big projects like this?
Absolutely. The closing down and opening up and relocating of a FBO on the property there as well. And they only have one at that airport, though.
Okay, cool. Thanks. Anybody else have any questions? Don't forget, we've got two speaker slips, so I won't forget you.
I just wanted to comment, it was an excellent presentation, and I particularly like whether you call it a snake or a game board. It is. It was a very good way to present it, and I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay. Why don't we start with Bill Borgsmiller?
Mr. Chair, members of the Commission, my name is Bill Borgsmiller. I'm the owner and CEO of ACI Jet. As you know, I've been hanging out here for a few years. We're obviously very excited about this airport and have expressed our interest on multiple occasions in being here. So I'm glad to see this process moving forward. It's no secret we were working to potentially fund the restaurant that a lot of people talked about earlier here tonight, because we saw that square of property kind of right smack in the middle of the FBO process and thought maybe we could help keep it alive, preserve what was going on there, and then provide a very creative solution, as part of kind of an all-in development proposal for that. But Henry and his team and everybody looked at it, and the city decided that was something that they weren't interested in or decided to decline it. And I just wanted to let you guys know that we completely respect the city's position. Doesn't affect our excitement at all about this airport, and we look forward to continuing to propose as the opportunity arrives. And thank you.
Thanks, Bill, and thanks for, I didn't start the timer, but thank you. And we had another slip appear, so why don't we go with Sean Sullivan next? And then lastly, Jay Ritterbeck. You're still back there, right? Awake? Okay, cool.
Hi, I'm Sean Sullivan, owner of Above All Aviation. I just want to make a comment to Carl about the transient parking. That would alleviate all my parking spots down there with an FBO. So I want to, when you guys consider that, keep in mind there is a flight school that uses a lot of those spaces. So if they were transient, then that would kind of put us out. So just wanted to make that comment. Thank you.
So we're not going to do interactive conversation, though. I saw you about to react, and I just wanted to preclude that. I apologize. Then last but not least, thanks, Sean. Jay, what's your first name?
Jay.
Jay, just Jay.
Just Jay.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Commissioners. My name is Jay Ritterbeck. I'm a senior planner at the City of Goleta in the Advanced Planning Division. Sorry that Councilmember Carriaco couldn't be here tonight.
Thank you.
Yes, you were wondering how to pronounce that. My role with the city is to analyze regional efforts that are surrounding the city. Reading staff reports, environmental documents, master plans, and such, just to give comments to our city council, our attorneys, and the planning director, just to keep them abreast of what's going on that could potentially affect this city.
Let me just, one question. You're here in a private capacity, correct?
No, I'm representing the city.
You are?
Yes.
Okay.
So,
is there any issue with that, Tava? No? Okay. Sorry, go ahead.
Shouldn't be. So so I read through the staff report, and when we saw two of the issues in the site engineering analysis that kind of gave us a little bit of a pause as far as the soils and having to elevate, potentially elevate, and if there was any part of this analysis, the assumptions that was going to make the city have to, and the airport, go back and look at the plan and look at the environmental document and see if there was going to be any changes necessary. And some others have alluded to that. Just at what point, it's just a general question, at what point in this snake diagram would that occur? If it's going to be up front, knowing that there's changed situations, if there's going to need to be any modification, alteration to that master plan, or after an FBO is chosen, if they've got some site-specific alterations that need to occur, is there going to be another analysis, or are they going to be grouped to the end, or just at what point? Because what the city doesn't want to have happen, as well as anybody else, is getting to the end and then there's, oh, we didn't look at that. So our staff is more, well, we love working with the city staff and the airport staff. We are not necessarily jealous of the airport, but we really do want to be good partners and good neighbors. And we saw this in our initial analysis and just wanted to come and kind of just weigh that we don't want to be caught at the end. Not just a challenge from the FBOs, but a challenge from somebody that's using that master planner and the environmental document as another thing that that they could challenge it on. So I just wanted to present that, and we really appreciate the staff and the hard work that they do. So thank you.
You're welcome. Going once, twice gone for any other public comment, and I think we have reached the end of a record Airport Commission meeting, and we are adjourned.